Chapter 519, The 24 Techniques of Tongtian Valley, Part 2. I've never spared anyone who tried to kill me, and I never will, Lucian said, voice calm but deadly. Yet today I find myself in a charitable mood. Your Fengho Chimen technique has proven quite useful, so I'll let you live. A cold smile curved Lucian's lips. With a gentle press of his palm against Zhou Sheng's forehead, he began to sift through his memories. Death could be pardoned, but the mind's secrets were not so easily shielded. After all, Fengho Chimen had aided Lucian in forging the prototype of his nascent small world. Zhou Sheng's life was the only debt he could forgive. Yet morality and principle, those were luxuries his enemies did not afford him. Images and fragments flooded in, Zhang Huayi and several others conspiring in a momentous undertaking. The world's cultivation system might be limited, but its array of Taoist arts was ripe with hidden power. Lucian's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Here lay the raw material he needed to deepen his own realm's essence. All of it traced back to a single, fateful gift, the forbidden secrets of Fengho Chimen. Lucian let the energies of the soul-binding charm, the summoning seal, the Tongtian talisman, the air-breathing technique, and the golden radiance spell drift back into his palm. He withdrew his hand and stared, astonished. So that's it, he murmured. Feng Baobao is actually Wu Gensheng's daughter, resurrected through the 8 rare arts. That explains her half-immortal constitution. He recalled the tragic chain of events. When young Feng Baobao died, her father's grief shattered him. In desperation, Wu Gensheng called 36 sworn brothers, masters from every allied clan and sect, to swear an oath by her name. Then he and 8 specially chosen adepts, each bearing a fragment of Ziyang Zhenren's inheritance, mastered the 8 rare arts and performed a resurrection ritual so powerful it claimed their lives. But Duan Muying, the second ritualist, was absent during the final incantation, and as a result, Feng Baobao returned without any memory of her past life. Even so, with 7 of the rare arts still bound within her, she emerged possessing an immortal body and an inexhaustible store of qi. In every sense, she had become a half-immortal. The 24-section Tongtian Valley, Ziyang Zhenren's legacy, could elevate ordinary mortals into true qi cultivators. That alone was remarkable. Lucian wasn't concerned with Wu Gensheng and Feng Baobao's personal histories, nor with the secrets of resurrection. After all, he had his own forbidden methods to cheat death, methods that flagrantly defied the natural order of this world. What truly fascinated him was the promise held within the 24-section Tongtian Valley, a chance for someone without any innate gift to ascend from obscurity to greatness. Opportunities like this were almost unheard of. In most realms, power was inborn. In the wizarding world of Harry Potter, for example, magic flowed only through those born with wizard blood. Without it, no spell could be cast. In other domains, advanced techniques for boosting one's strength demanded special qualifications, impossible to obtain if you lacked the right heritage. Across countless universes, latent talent was the gatekeeper to extraordinary abilities. But here, in Tongtian Valley, Ziyang Zhenren's inheritance offered a path to break that rule, and Lucian intended to claim it. Lucian stood at the edge of the ancient ravine, eyes alight with determination. Before him lay the legendary 24 sections Tongtian Valley, said to bestow qi cultivation methods and the very qualifications to practice them on anyone who could traverse its path even once. Rumor had it that beasts as lowly as monkeys, upon completing the trial, would awaken their spiritual wisdom, gradually absorb qi, and rise to spirit rank, an event known as the Immortal's Enlightenment. Paired with the famed inheritance of Ziyang Zhenren, 8 chosen disciples could each master one of the 8 mystical arts, and together forge a half-immortal. Such was the valley's promise of power. Then let's see it with our own eyes, Lucian declared. He swept his hand through the shimmering barrier of his small world, and with a soft pop, the startled Zhou Sheng was flung back into reality. Lucian wasted no words on farewells. In the next instant, he had vanished. Zhou Sheng staggered upright, heart-pounding. He blinked against the sudden silence of the Qinling Mountains, then realized Lucian now stood at the faintly glowing entrance to the Tongtian Valley. The air shimmered with latent power, as if the valley itself beckoned challengers to step forward. Zhou Sheng wiped cold sweat from his forehead. His mind raced. The Zhenwu Great Emperor, What kind of existence is he? Could he truly stand shoulder to shoulder with Ziyang Zhenren? And if so, why covet my Fenghao Chimin? Never before had he glimpsed such overwhelming aura. As Lucian prepared to enter the valley's first section, Zhou Sheng could only watch in awe and a growing dread of the mysteries that lay ahead. Lucian was certain of one thing. The old celestial master had no hope against that golden infant. Only someone on the brink of true immortality, like Master Ziyang, could match such power. Yet, if he was so formidable, why hadn't he bothered to probe Lucian's Fenghao Chimin? Lucian shrugged. Does it matter? He spared me once. I doubt he'll come after me again. Best not to earn his attention. Confident that his secret was safe, Lucian watched as the strange being abandoned the fight. In a sudden shimmer, it transformed into a bird and darted off into the sky. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Qinling Mountains, Lucian retraced the landmarks sketched in Zhou Sheng's memory until he arrived at the mouth of the 24-section Tongqian Valley. From this angle, it curved before him like a great, slumbering spine. Just as Zhou Sheng described, he murmured, it really does resemble a human back. According to legend, Master Ziyang himself hewed this valley, carving 24 ridges that align with the body's meridians. Any cultivator who enters will find their qi instinctively guided along those grooves. By the time they emerge at the summit, their internal energy has been coaxed into perfect circulation, a transformative boon on the path to immortality. Lucian took a deep breath, feeling the mountain air tingle around him. With one last look at the valley's looming entrance, he stepped forward onto the first ridge. Here, his true test, and the next stage of his cultivation, awaited. Just as Lucian leaned forward to inspect the formation, an invisible barrier of qi slammed into him, clashing violently with the energy already coursing through his body. He narrowed his eyes. A man-made qiju, he murmured, but at this level, it's hardly a challenge. A golden ward flared to life around him, and with a sharp gesture, Lucian rent a tear in the qiju's weaving currents. He slipped through the breach as easily as if passing through a crack in glass. Qiju, literally feng shui formations, are intricate arrays of energy, either naturally occurring or constructed by masters. They blend offensive, defensive, and other specialized effects into a single scheme. Stray from the designated path, and the swirling qi will lash out. At best, you emerge battered and bruised. At worst, the formation distorts your very fate, delivering a death so sudden you'll never know what struck you. In essence, it's like peering into some inner vision only to have the world rebound against you. Wu Gensheng only managed to discover and enter the 24-section Tongqian Valley because he was born with the rare talent to neutralize any form of qi. His innate gift rendered the valley's qi bureau defenses irrelevant. Without it, he never would have passed the barriers. Over time, he carefully mapped the hidden passage, and once he was certain of its course, led 36 sworn brothers through to the inner sanctum. Lucian, who had learned the true entry route from Zhou Sheng, was less concerned with the path itself than with testing the Qi Bureau's legendary power. His trial proved that, although the Bureau's wards were indeed formidable, they were not invincible. A cultivator with sufficient force could shatter them and push right through. As soon as Lucian set foot inside the 24-section Tongqian Valley, he raised his hand and intoned the restoration spell. "Restore as before," he commanded. A gentle yet potent wave of energy washed over the entire valley, erasing the subtle tamperings Wu Gensheng had made. When Wu Gensheng first uncovered the valley's secret and the ancient 8 strange skills, he had twisted the ley lines so that any ordinary traveler attempting the trials would be consumed by chaotic qi and die rather than emerge empowered. Lucian's spell unwound those distortions, returning the valley's qi to its original harmonious flow and reopening its true wonders to worthy cultivators once more. The corrupting force had even wiped out Ziyang Zhenren's entire legacy, leaving no trace of his advanced Taoist teachings. Without those lost records, no one could piece together the mysteries of the 24 sections of Tongqian Valley. Lucian, determined to master that very system, knew he had to recover every fragment of Ziyang Zhenren's inheritance. Fortunately, he wielded the incredible reparative incantation, a heaven-defying spell capable of reconstructing damaged scripture and restoring what had been erased. With careful words and precise hand seals, Lucian mended the torn Taoist manuscripts until Ziyang Genren's teachings re-emerged in full. Once the heritage was reclaimed, Lucian chased the last of the valley's mischievous monkeys back into the forest and settled in to begin his study. For more than a week, he pored over each of the 24 sections, committing every principle and technique to memory. By the time he finished, Lucian's understanding of the valley's profound Taoist art had deepened beyond all expectation. Chapter 520, Bu Village, Update 1. Lucian emerged from the depths of the 24 sections Tongqian Valley, pausing to savor the crisp mountain air. He exhaled in admiration. Even among cultivators, the ability to reach the Immortal Tribulation's critical point was a rare and staggering achievement. Just a week ago, he had only begun exploring the Taoist arts of this world. Drawing on his background in other realms' magic, he'd already absorbed concepts more quickly than those who had studied here for decades. Yet until now, his grasp had been largely superficial. Over the past 7 days, however, he had immersed himself in Ziyang Genren's transmission. Each morning brought a cascade of insights, and every night he fell asleep compiling new breakthroughs. His progress felt exponential. Techniques that once took years to refine were now taking shape in mere hours. With Ziyang Genren's legacy firmly in hand, Lucian looked ahead to his next milestone, the borrowing Taoist method of Shen Chong, one of the legendary 4 madmen. Where others might fear a plateau, he felt only anticipation. Armed with fresh understanding and unwavering resolve, he was ready to ascend to even greater heights. Lucian tested his newly refined borrowing magic and was thrilled by what he discovered. By briefly borrowing the energies of other realms, he could push his body's limits faster than ever, and even glimpse the secrets of the legendary 8 wonders that countless heroes across the world had sought. It felt wasteful to leave such a breakthrough behind, so he decided to store the technique in his small world and study it at his own pace. With that settled, he stepped onto the forest floor, placed his hand on the earth, and activated the mountain-moving array. A deep rumble shook the valley as the entire 24 sections Tongqian Valley lifted off its foundations and vanished into Lucian's pocket dimension. In a flash of light, he teleported away, bound for Beijing and countless hours of research. Not long after Lucian's departure, a short-haired, pink-haired girl and her small retinue arrived at the same spot in the Qinling Mountains. She had risked everything to capture Mage and extract the valley's location, and now, after days of climbing and searching, she expected to set eyes on the fabled stronghold. Instead, all that remained was a yawning chasm where the earth had been torn away. How? The girl's voice trembled in disbelief. The Tongqian Valley was supposed to be here, yet it had simply disappeared. Mei Jinfeng only comes this way once a year, and it's been barely a few months since her last visit. What kind of power could have uprooted an entire valley in so short a time? Qu Tong, the pink-haired president of the Yaoxing Society, stared down at the empty chasm that had once been the 24 sections Tongqian Valley. She had assumed some faction had discovered the site first, then poured in troops and equipment to excavate it. But the idea that a single person could do this? Unthinkable. "Send out a reconnaissance team," she ordered, pressing her fingers to her temples. Whoever was responsible, she refused to believe even the mightiest clan, let alone Nadatong, could move an entire valley overnight without leaving a trace. And if Nadatong were involved, her informants would surely have reported something. Moments later, her lieutenant returned, eyes wide. "President, our survey shows the valley was removed in under 24 hours, and it happened all at once. There's no sign of machinery, no footprints or campsites, nothing." Silence fell over the team. Qu Tong tightened her jaw. The report was exhaustive, yet it only deepened the mystery. Some force beyond their reckoning had cleared the valley clean, vanishing every trace as if it had never existed. And now Qu Tong was left with one unsettling question. What or who could possess such power? "You're not serious, are you?" Qu Tong's eyes widened. "You mean someone used magic to move an entire valley in one go?" The investigators exchanged uneasy glances. At this point, it's the only explanation that fits the data. Their faces went stiff, but the evidence spoke for itself. Qu Tong snorted. So you think this is the legend of the foolish old man who moved mountains, only there's a squad of yellow-turbaned strongmen hauling earth behind him? Look at the size of this valley. One person with magic, do you really believe he's a god? Back in Beijing, Lucian slipped into the family residence and with quiet precision wiped Jin Yuanyuan's and her parents' memories of Jin Baobao. He even took the time to reinforce their bodies against any lingering spiritual backlash. Then he vanished into the night once more. The Jin Baobao identity had served its purpose, but now it was a liability, tying him to family politics and mundane duties. Lucian had no interest in that web of obligations. His real priority lay elsewhere, gathering every Taoist method, every arcane secret that could propel him toward true mastery. Chapter 12. The Mist-Shrouded Foothills. After completing his collection of crystalline spirit cores, Lucian withdrew into the secluded 24-section Tongtian Valley within the small world. There, he set up a makeshift workshop beneath ancient pines, drawing upon Xiang Zhenren's inherited Taoist scriptures. His goal was nothing less than to synthesize and refine every cultivation method at his disposal, melding fire and water, yin and yang, into a seamless, optimized path forward. With that foundational work underway, a new target came into focus: Zhang Chulan's chi source. Lucian already possessed the crucial bargaining chip, a living record of Feng Baobao's life experiences encoded in her very essence. Present that to Zhang, and he would have little choice but to surrender the chi source willingly. Tracing Zhang Chulan's aura through divination, Lucian was surprised to find the young cultivator had vanished from the capitals of Beijing and Tianjin. Instead, Zhang had fled all the way to Liupanshui, Guizhou, above the remote settlement of Biyu village, where the mists hung low on the mountainside and rumors of secret missions whispered through the trees. Why choose such an isolated place? Lucian murmured to himself as he readied his spirit transport. Whatever urgent task drew Zhang Chulan here, it wouldn't go unnoticed. A pulse of inner light, and Lucian vanished from the valley's shadowed grove. Moments later, he materialized on a narrow, rock-strewn path high above Biyu village. The air was cool and damp, the sun barely piercing the veil of mist that clung to the pines. Below him, the village lay silent, its tiled roof slick from recent rain. Drawing in a steadying breath, Lucian reviewed what he'd learned through soul-searching about the Nadatong network. It was a sprawling alliance divided into 8 bodies. The Supreme Board of Directors at the apex, supported by 7 regional commands: East China, South China, North China, Central China, Northeast China, Northwest China, and Southwest China. Each branch controlled its own territories, directing resources and agents in service of greater, often hidden, ambitions. If Zhang Chulan had slipped under Nadatong's wing, no wonder he'd chosen such a distant outpost. But tonight, Lucian intended to penetrate their veil of secrecy. With Feng Baobao's lifeline secure in his grasp, he was confident he could force a meeting with Zhang Chulan and claim that chi source once and for all. Stepping forward, Lucian let the valley's silence welcome him. His second great mission lay before him, and there would be no turning back. Zhang Chulan had been posted to the North China region, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, Shanxi, and central Inner Mongolia, all under Commander Xu Xi's authority. Guizhou, by contrast, lay far to the southwest and was not part of her remit. Lucian hovered above the little village, frowning as he scanned the gathering below. Dozens of unfamiliar auras pulsed around him, some remarkably strong. He even detected Wang Ye and Zhu Jieqing among them, yet not a single name of any renowned sect or clan registered in his mind. A moment's reflection confirmed none of these people originated from Liupanshui, Guizhou. He shrugged. To ordinary cultivators, they might seem intimidating, but to him they were nothing more than chickens, big weak chickens and small weak chickens at best. With that thought, Lucian dropped silently from the sky and landed in the dusty lane. Without hesitation, he strode to a weathered wooden house and rapped on the door. Knock, 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 knock. His senses told him Zhang Chulan was inside, flanked by Feng Baobao and several other formidable figures. Now all that remained was waiting for them to open up. Who's there? At the sharp knock on the door, a wary voice answered, and the door swung open. Brother Jin? Zhang Chulan blinked in surprise when he saw Lucian standing in the doorway. He hadn't expected any visitors, least of all him. Just days ago, Zhang Chulan had helped Lord Wang resolve a crisis in Beijing. Now, he'd been reassigned to a new mission: arrest Chen Duo, a temporary operative in the South China district who'd murdered Liao Zhang, the district's commander. The broader goal was to phase out all temporary workers, and Zhang Chulan was ordered to bring along Feng Baobao. Temp operatives from other districts had joined the task force too. But during their pursuit, they'd uncovered a startling twist. Chen Duo had joined a secret faction known as Biu Village. Suddenly, arresting him became a secondary concern. Their revised orders were to eradicate Biu Village, apprehend its leader Ma Shanhong, conscript the village's unusual talents into the company, and disperse the remaining civilians awaiting conversion. That evening, as Zhang Chulan and the other temps huddled together to finalize tomorrow's battle plan, a knock on the door had interrupted them. And now here stood Lucian, breaking the tense hush. Zhang Chulan stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "You've caught us at a critical moment." Chapter 521, Understanding the Origin of the Chi Body, Second Update. Lucian crouched in the darkness just inside the doorway, every sense straining. If anyone from Biu Village discovered their scheme, it would jeopardize everything. That was why he'd kept himself so alert. Yet the moment he cracked the door open, he wasn't met by a curious villager or a soldier on patrol. He came face to face with Jin Baobao, the infamous Golden Youth. Lucian froze. Jin Baobao had been in Beijing only days before, so why was he suddenly here in remote Biu Village? And more unsettling still, why hadn't the nearby regiment received any word of his arrival? A dozen questions raced through Lucian's mind, but before he could voice any of them, a familiar figure stirred beside him. Zhang Chulan's heart pounded as she recognized the unannounced visitor. With calm composure, Jin Baobao stepped into the corridor and fixed his gaze on her. "Zhang Chulan," he said quietly, "I came all this way just to see you." At that, Zhang's pulse leapt. She remembered the veiled warnings of Wang Ye and Zhu Geiqing. She forced a light laugh and leaned casually against the doorframe. "Brother Jin," she replied, "I've told you countless times. I don't have it. Everyone knows that." A slow, knowing smile curved Jin Baobao's lips. "Oh, but I already know the truth about Feng Baobao's past life. That's the bargaining chip I hold. So, what do you say?" For a moment, the corridor held its breath. Zhang Chulan's eyes widened, her breath hitching as cold realization settled in. Zhang Chulan glanced over at Feng Baobao, still fussing with the Molotov cocktail. "Bauer, that's enough. Set it aside and come with me." He then addressed Xiao Zizai. "Xiaozai, you know the plan. Once you've rounded everyone up, I'll take care of the rest." With that, Zhang Chulan led Feng Baobao and Lucian toward the edge of the woods. After they'd put a dozen paces between themselves and the others, he stopped and called back, "Jin, meet us in a quiet spot. We need to talk." Back among the remaining operatives, Wang Zhenqiu of the southwest region watched the trio disappear with growing curiosity. "Why is Jin here? Are they about to report this to HQ?" Lao Meng from the northwest region shifted uncomfortably, while Black Guaner of central China remained unreadable. Finally, Xiao Zizai shook his head. "Tell Er Zhuang to notify the company, warn them not to provoke the Golden One. He's not someone we can afford to rile up. Besides, HQ still hasn't even made contact with him." Xiao Zizai's eyes locked on Wang Zhenqiu, silently demanding a response. Lucian was the only one among the temporary operatives, aside from Zhang Chulan, who truly understood their opponent's strength. After all, Longhu Mountain in Jiangxi province fell within East China's sphere, and when the full force laid siege to it, Lucian had been sent in support. Later, when the Wang family surrounded Jin Baobao and seized the Tongtian Rui, Lucian accompanied Dou Lei, East China's commanding officer, and watched in stunned silence as Jin Baobao utterly destroyed the Wang clan. The resulting inferno carved out a horrifying crater that still felt unreal to him. In the days that followed, Lucian learned just how dangerously curious Wang Zhenqiu could be, and how deadly it would be to draw Jin Baobao's ire. With the power Jin Baobao had already displayed, even the combined strength of all their temporary agents wouldn't hold him back. According to the company's latest risk assessment, Golden Baby, Jin Baobao's fearsome epithet, stood at a higher danger level than Lao Shenxi, the so-called Heavenly Master. The Heavenly Master might be mighty, but he'd never taken a life in all his years. Jin Baobao, on the other hand, could annihilate an entire family with a single, effortless strike. Wang Zhenchu ruffled his sun-bright hair and flashed a cocky grin at Xiao Zizai. "Brother Xiao, don't treat me like an idiot." Xiao Zizai narrowed his eyes. "I know Baobao is not someone to trifle with. Any fool could see that." Not far Zhang Chulan had slipped into the little grove to check for eavesdroppers. Satisfied the area was secure, he returned and bowed deferentially to Lucian. "Master Lucian," he said, "how did you learn the details of Baobao's past?" Lucian let a faint smile curve his lips. "Xiao Zhang, you know my reputation with chi body arts. If I wished, I could pluck the source body technique straight from your mind, but I prefer negotiation to coercion." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Some time ago, I sought out Zhou Sheng of the Fengho Chiman sect, the very man who devised the 8 Wonders, and learned Baobao's entire history from him." A hush fell over the four as Lucian's revelation settled in. The rustle of leaves was the only sound as they exchanged glances, each weighing the price of the information just offered. Lucian met Jin Baobao's expectant gaze and took a steadying breath. "If you're willing to hand over the source of the chi body," Jin Baobao said, "I can teach you how to use it, and I swear no one will ever learn where it truly comes from. You'll keep it secret, and so will I." Lucian nodded solemnly. "Brother Jin, I believe you. I haven't lied. I genuinely don't know how to tap into this chi source." He opened his shirt to reveal the faintly glowing mark at his chest. "But I do possess that source. My grandfather entrusted it to Sister Bauer, and she passed it on to me. If you can unlock its power, I'll willingly hand it over." Lucian's heart pounded. If Jin Baobao could guarantee his safety and help Sister Bauer recover her lost memories, he'd gladly share the chi source with every cultivator in the world. He had no lofty ambitions beyond living in peace with her. And after witnessing Jin Baobao's effortless devastation of the Wang family, yet learning that he'd spared Wang Ye's Fenghao Chiman despite its owner's resistance, Lucian trusted his promise. Jin Baobao sought the chi body source by force, but Lucian believed that, this time, the older man would keep his word. Lucian felt powerless to resist, and not even his sect could overrule him. His master, Lao Tianxi, had openly acknowledged that Lucian stood no chance against Jin Baobao. What reason, then, did he have to refuse? By forging a bond with Jin Baobao now, Lucian might secure an ally who could protect him and Feng Baobao if they ever faced danger. Jin Baobao's lips curved into a confident smile. "You needn't worry. If you agree, I've mastered a method to extract the chi body source flow technique from you." At a brief nod from Lucian, Zhang Chulan stepped forward. Lucian took a steady breath and revealed everything he knew: the 36 Thieves' Oath of Brotherhood, the mysterious 8 strange skills, and the full story of Feng Baobao's life. "I've also brought Wu Gensheng's personal effects," he added. "There's even a painting of Feng Baobao among them." With a graceful sweep of his hand, Lucian scattered a handful of items at their feet. These were the remnants of Wu Gensheng's journey through the 24 sections of Tongtian Valley, mostly trinkets and keepsakes with little practical use, yet carrying the weight of a life once lived. Feng Baobao knelt down and picked up the painting from the ground. Her breath caught as she stared at the woman in the portrait, an uncanny mirror of herself. She pressed her palm to her chest and whispered, "So it's true, I really do have a family. My father is Wu Gensheng, also known as Feng Yao." A slow smile spread across her face as the pieces fell into place. No wonder grandfather refused to return to Longhu Mountain all this time. Standing beside her, Zhang Chulan listened in stunned silence. His heart thundered in his ears, but before he could speak, Lucian stepped forward. With a single, deliberate motion, he laid his hand on Zhang Chulan's forehead. A pulse of mental energy surged into Zhang Chulan's mind, seeking out the hidden pattern of origin qi within his body. Under ordinary circumstances, such an intrusion would have failed. Zhang Chulan himself barely understood the nature of his qi, having only recently begun to study the Taoist path of this world. He had no knowledge of how to reconstruct the ancient Longhu Mountain techniques simply by sensing the flow of his own energy. But Lucian's inheritance was different. As the heir of Master Ziyang and the rightful successor to the Longhu Mountain exercises, Lucian could discern every subtle current of origin qi. All he had to do was observe. and in that instant, the lost methods began to weave themselves back into Zhang Chulan's unconscious mind, restoring those esoteric movements as if they had never been forgotten. Drawing on the Longhu Mountain exercises and the inheritance left by Master Ziyang, Zhang Huayi at last uncovered the true origin of her chi body. Lucian exhaled softly and withdrew his hand. "So this is the source of chi," he murmured. No wonder Master Zhang said his understanding has already surpassed Wu Gensheng. Under Ziyang Zhenren's guidance, Lucian had long since mastered the Dragon Tiger Mountain technique. Now, having observed the chi source in action, he had reconstructed the entire source of chi flow method in record time and grasped its true potential. The power of the Tongtian talisman lay in its ability to channel any talisman art directly through one's chi without relying on physical talismans. In fact, it proved far more potent than conventional tools and only grew stronger as the practitioner's skill increased. Equally formidable was the spirit binding and general sending talisman. With it, one could seize every spirit in existence, ancient demon beasts that had cultivated for millennia, restless souls of the deceased, binding them to one's will. Those spirits, once subjugated, could then be used to bolster a cultivator's own strength indefinitely. Yet all these techniques paled before the true art of the chi body source flow, the apex of talismanic cultivation. Lucian sat cross-legged in the candlelit chamber, his mind racing through every nuance of the chi body source stream he'd just awakened. This mysterious energy wasn't merely on par with the fabled spirit of the gods, it effectively replicated those divine powers. At will, it could dispel any enchantment, replacing arcane barriers with pure, unfiltered life and death force. Beyond that, it conferred a host of advantages. It amplified the user's physical strength, neutralized toxins, and bolstered defenses against both magical and mundane threats. On closer inspection, Lucian realized the chi body source stream was essentially a fusion, an upgraded synthesis of the spirit of the gods and the legendary Golden Light Curse. Such immense potential came with a catch, however. It devoured vast quantities of chi. Should one's internal reserves run dry, the source stream would collapse, leaving its wielder vulnerable. Lucian smiled to himself. Chi, mana, magic power. To him, these were all interchangeable terms for the same life force, and he had more than enough to spare. Exhaustion was simply not an option. As he calibrated the flow of energy within him, he also reviewed Zhang Chulan's skill set, an exercise in magical reconnaissance. In the process, he caught a fleeting glimpse of Chulan's memories. He saw Zhang Huayi's desperate infiltration of the Tang sect stronghold the moment the enemy's deadliest chi poison, Dongxiang, took hold, and then the astonishing recovery that followed. Not only did Huayi shrug off the lethal toxin, he turned on his foes and, in the ensuing skirmish, cut down more than a dozen veteran masters from the alien world. Lucian nodded to himself. With allies like these, and powers like his own, the coming trials would be anything but easy. But he was more than ready. Lucian's final moments came when Dongxiang's poison overwhelmed him. His chi reserves were exhausted, and he could no longer sustain the chi source flow that fortified his body. Had he retained even a fraction more energy, he might never have been forced into hiding for so many years. What makes the chi source flow so extraordinary is that it renders all pure energy-based spells useless against him, yet still allows him to cast magic of his own. In effect, Lucian became the only known human able to stand toe-to-toe with the greatest black dragon of the fairy tale world. Even Ziref, the dark mage who unleashed countless demons, trembles at the black dragon's name. No incantation can crack its scales, and likewise its elemental fury shatters against Lucian's chi-infused defenses. A drawn-out magical duel would be futile. Only a grueling, close-quarters fight can decide a winner. But how can a man's muscles match a dragon's enormity? Worse yet, the dragon's roar alone can crush an enemy's spirit like a cheat code in a rigged game. Fortunately, with his chi source flow finally mastered, Lucian can now fight on truly equal terms. When he faces the black dragon, their spells neutralize one another, leaving only raw strength and willpower. Lucian bolsters his physique with chi enhancement techniques, and if the struggle drags on, he can even pull his foe into his pocket dimension, where no beast, however colossal, can rely on sheer size or elemental magic to triumph. Lucian swept a confident glance across the war map laid out before him. With these positions and reinforcements, our chances of winning are extremely high. Zhang Chulan raised an eyebrow. That's it? No hidden catch? Lucian reached out and gently laid a hand on Zhang Chulan's head, pausing for a moment before pulling back. Zhang Chulan, expecting some dramatic spark or jolt, felt nothing. He frowned. I thought you'd know what skill I'd been using. Just by touch, you seem to be coming up blank. Lucian smiled ruefully. Normally, yes, I can identify someone's ability the instant I touch them, but since this particular skill was unfamiliar to me, I couldn't read it directly. I had to work it out the old-fashioned way, which took a bit of time. Zhang Chulan exhaled in astonishment. Lucian, that's incredible. You could walk up to anyone in the world, touch their head, and instantly learn their power? In theory, Lucian admitted, I could, but I don't do it willy-nilly. Extracting memories or skills from someone requires their consent. It's a matter of basic ethics. Zhang Chulan's eyes went wide. But you just touched me without asking. Lucian's expression softened. Actually, you did consent. Remember this morning when I asked if I could scan your skill profile? You nodded before breakfast. A slow flush crept over Zhang Chulan's cheeks as realization dawned. Oh, right. I'd forgotten. Lucian chuckled and clapped him on the shoulder. No harm done. Now, with your expertise and my special touch, we'll secure that victory in no time. Zhang Chulan managed a sheepish grin. Together, they returned to the map, their strategy clearer and their trust strengthened than ever. Lucian leaned forward, his eyes serious. To deduce the chi body source flow technique, I absolutely need you to share your memory as a reference. He laid a steady hand on Zhang Chulan's shoulder. Just a friendly reminder, you may be an alien with an extraordinary physique and decades of cultivation under your belt, but even you have limits. Don't push yourself too hard. You'll burn out your masts and oars, so to speak. Zhang Chulan frowned. Masts and oars? At that moment, Feng Baobao approached, her wide eyes sparkling with curiosity. She had finally recovered from the shock of her past life's revelations and slipped back into her usual gentle self. She'd long sought the truth about her family's fate, something she'd expected, in her heart, to be tragic. Now that she'd found the answers she needed, she felt surprisingly at peace. Sister Bauer, Lucian explained with a small smile, when I warned someone about destroying their masts and oars, I'm quoting Su Shi. In his poem, the image evokes a ship so battered that its sails and oars are ruined by wind and smoke, meaning one's strength is utterly spent. Feng Baobao blinked in understanding, then returned a relieved smile. I see. In other words, you're saying Zhang Chulan needs to conserve his energy, or he'll exhaust himself completely. Exactly, Lucian said. He turned back to Zhang Chulan, whose expression had grown determined. Now, are you ready to delve into your memory and help me unravel the source flow maps? Zhang Chulan drew a deep breath. Yes, let's begin. You can look it up on your phone. Chulan hastily saw Bao Bao off, then turned back to Lucian with an awkward smile. Brother Lucian, you're young, energetic, and, single. Got it. Lucian simply nodded, understanding that Chulan was teasing. After all, Chulan remained a virgin by necessity. His alien identity and its restrictions left little room for personal entanglements. He scratched the back of his head. What else can I do? I'll keep things as they are so that Bao Bao and I stay safe. Even though he now knew the full truth, Chulan had no intention of whisking Bao Bao away from Nadutong. It was far better to stand under the shelter of a powerful ally. Nadutong was that ally, backed by Shu San and Shu Si. They could handle most threats and continue protecting Bao Bao. If they left the company and her secret of immortality were discovered, they'd have nowhere to turn. Not even Longhu Mountain could guarantee their safety then. The old celestial masters might lend a hand at most, but Chulan wasn't willing to turn the entire alien world against them and upset the cosmic balance just to spirit Bao Bao away. Venturing into foreign realms only made things worse. The chaos and complexity out there far surpassed anything at home, so for now, Lucian decided that preserving the status quo was his safest course. Stopping beside Zhang Chulan, he offered a friendly piece of advice. Listen, Zhang Chulan, it's always better to rely on your own strength than on others. Your chi body source flow ranks among the highest cultivation paths, and it holds virtually limitless potential. The Sovereign's way is simple. train diligently. The day you reach the level of the old Tianxi, even if the secret behind Feng Baobao's immortality is exposed, no one will dare to challenge you. Lucian's mood was buoyant after absorbing the new source flow, so he spoke in earnest. In his experience, nothing mattered more than honing one's own power. The old master restrained himself only out of concern for the alien world and for Longhu Mountain. But with Zhang Chulan's cunning mind, once he wielded a celestial master's might, he truly would be untouchable. Zhang Chulan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Then, as if testing Lucian's sincerity, he arched an eyebrow. "Brother Jin, you really don't care about becoming immortal?" Lucian turned, waved him off with a grin, and replied casually, "Not at all, because I already am immortal." "See you again in the future," Lucian said, and in the next heartbeat, he was gone. Chapter 523, Recovering Memories is What I Do Best, second update. After drawing the chi source from Zhang Chulan, Lucian chose not to leave Biu village. Instead, he teleported to the largest house at its rear. Sifting through Zhang Chulan's memories, he quickly pieced together why he'd come here and uncovered the existence of the new Jiejiao sect under Ma Shanhong. He had little interest in their self-cultivation furnace, an apparatus said to elevate ordinary people into spirit cultivators. With the inheritance bestowed by Ziyang Genren, Lucian commanded a far superior method. By traversing the 24 sections of Tongqian Valley even once, any being, monkey or otherwise, could absorb qi and ascend to spirit form without risk or pain. By comparison, the furnace required the aid of powerful cultivators and still offered no guarantee of success. Its transformation process was agonizing, demanded tremendous willpower, and even at its best fell short of the effortless, foolproof gains afforded by Tongtian Valley's 24 sections. Lucian paused at the threshold, heart racing. He'd come for one reason, Ma Shanhong's legendary gift, the Divine Machine 100 Refinements, one of the 8 esoteric arts said to be the pinnacle of mechanical alchemy. With that power, a craftsman could reshape, control, even transmute any object at will. He pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. Before him stood a massive golden furnace, its surface rippling with molten light. Beside it, a long-haired man hammered rhythmically, sparks scattering like fireflies. At the creak of the door, the artisan froze and turned, impatience flashing in his dark eyes. "I told everyone not to disturb me while I'm working," the man snapped. He dropped the hammer and sprang off the furnace's platform, every inch the vigilant sentinel. Rumor held that Biu's villagers guarded all entrances jealously. No one passed without permission, and no one approached this chamber at all. Lucian took a steadying breath. "Ma Shanhong," he began, keeping his tone respectful. "I'm Lucian. I've come because I've heard you're Ma Benzai's grandson, and that you've mastered the Divine Machine 100 Refinements." For a moment, the Forge Master's gaze narrowed, assessing the stranger who'd breached his sanctum. Then, with a slow nod, he lifted his chin. "You've heard correctly," he said, "but why seek me out, especially now when I've asked for solitude?" Lucian squared his shoulders. "Because what you can do, it could change everything." Outside, sparks fell silently, and the golden furnace glowed brighter, as if eagerly awaiting their answer. Lucian's voice was calm and unwavering as he faced Ma Shanhong. "Master, I wish to learn your Divine Machine 100 Refinement." Ma Shanhong's eyebrows shot upward. He studied the newcomer with cool appraisal. "You ask for my Shenji Balian technique? That depends entirely on whether you're worthy of it." He had no qualms about teaching his disciples, 12 chosen villagers who trained under him. But to outsiders, he was far more cautious. Only one among the 12, Chu Rang, had shown the talent to master his art, and Ma Shanhong had devoted himself to guiding that young man. He had also made an exception for a second outsider, Zhu Qing, who had proven himself helpful in forging the self-cultivation furnace with his arcane skills. But a stranger who had slipped into the village unbidden and demanded the highest secrets? Such a one must first answer for himself. With a low hum, Ma Shanhong drew on the hidden energies of the shrine. The ground trembled slightly, and the air shimmered as the qi in his body fused with the ancient ley lines beneath them. From above, dozens of delicately crafted puppets, uncannily lifelike, began to drop, encircling Lucian like a tightening noose. Each one swung from invisible threads, wooden faces frozen in neutral expression, arms poised as if ready to strike. Lucian remained motionless, his gaze steady as the puppets closed in. He knew this was the trial Ma Anhong set for any who sought his secret art. First, demonstrate resolve. Only then would the answer to whether he could command the divine machine 100 refinement be revealed. Ma Shanhong's workshop was filled with puppets forged from Shenji Balian, each a formidable construct in the alien world. Among them loomed a jet-black automaton whose power rivaled that of a minor sect leader. Yet before any of them could strike, Lucian simply raised a hand. In a blinding flash of lightning, every puppet, black or otherwise, crumbled into shattered fragments. "Call me Lucian," a calm voice echoed in Ma Shanhong's mind. "I'm not here to steal. I want the divine machine 100 refinements so we can come to an agreement." Ma Shanhong's heart thundered as he realized Lucian had vanished from sight and rematerialized behind him, without a single warning, without a chance to draw a weapon. He broke out in a cold sweat. He'd come armed with countless magical artifacts, yet not one saw the light of battle. Then Lucian's name registered, the very name Ma Shanhong's scouts had reported back when they investigated this mysterious newcomer. In that instant, Ma Shanhong understood two things. First, that he was utterly outmatched, and second, that any negotiation with Lucian would be on Lucian's terms alone. "Are you the golden prodigy who topped the Luotian Grand Trial and wiped out every master of the Wang clan?" "That's me," Lucian replied evenly. "I bear no ill will. I'm here to propose an exchange." He stepped forward, flicked his wrist, and whispered the words of a repair spell. Every broken doll in Ma Shanhong's hands mended itself instantly, seams sealing, eyes resetting, limbs knitting back together. Lucian turned to face the astonished man and offered a reassuring smile. Before any deal could be struck, he needed to demonstrate the power that lay behind his calm words. Ma Shanhong's jaw clenched. "What do you want in return?" he demanded, voice low and wary. No one relaxed in the presence of a warrior who could end them with a single gesture. Lucian's gaze drifted to the ornate self-cultivation furnace standing at the edge of the clearing. "First," he said, "tell me why Nadatong has sent all those temporary laborers to Bu village." A flicker of anger passed over Ma Shanhong's face. "Their mission is to seize Chen Duo," he replied firmly. "But Chen Duo is one of ours. She's from Bu village. No one's allowed to lay a hand on her." His voice rang with conviction. "She's like family to me." Lucian inclined his head in respect. Ma Shanhong might be stubborn and headstrong, but his loyalty and simplicity were qualities Lucian admired. Here was a man of principle, someone worthy of a fair bargain. By Zhang Chulan's reckoning, Ma Shanhong truly treated every descendant of the Eight Wonders as family. He was resolute about upholding justice, and wouldn't think twice before confronting any force to protect his comrades. Lucian met Ma Shanhong's startled gaze and continued in a low voice. "Honestly, they didn't come for Chen Duo at all. He was just a distraction, and if things went smoothly, they'd have snatched only 2 temporary workers. In fact, they've already sealed off the village and its outskirts with ranks of Nadatong aliens, backed up by soldiers and heavy weapons." Ma Shanhong's face went pale. Sensing his shock, Lucian pressed on. "Their true target is you. You invented that self-cultivation furnace, the device that can turn ordinary people into extraordinary ones. Once the number of these suddenly empowered individuals swells, conflict with the general population is inevitable. Normally, an extraordinary person is trained from childhood, mind and body honed, power earned step by step, and a healthy respect for that power instilled. Your furnace bypasses all that, giving anyone a leap in ability overnight. That upends the balance, and that's exactly what they fear." Ma Shanhong clenched his fists, realization dawning. They weren't here to kidnap Chen Duo. They were coming for the furnace, and for him. But the extraordinary beings you created with the self-cultivation furnace have suddenly grown in power, yet lack any conscience. At some point, they'll inevitably spiral out of control, wreaking havoc and costing countless innocent lives. We cannot allow that to happen. Here's our offer. Hand over the magic device used in your refinements, and we'll guarantee you safe passage out of the village and your life. "How can I agree to that?" Lucian shot back. "I need to perfect the self-cultivation furnace. Only then can I recover my lost memories and find my family again. I won't abandon it. I can't leave alone." At Lucian's defiance, Ma Shanhong sank to the ground, bewildered. First, the company had deployed overwhelming force to encircle and subdue Bu village. Resistance was futile. Second, he had never imagined the inhumans spawned by the furnace would lose control so catastrophically. He had believed every person deserved the chance to become an inhuman. He'd never foreseen the nightmare that would follow. And yet, despite everything, he understood Lucian's motivations. His own desire to refine the furnace and unlock its secrets had felt every bit as urgent. Recover my lost memories? Lucian's voice caught in his throat. The stranger's lips curved into a confident smile. Memory restoration is my specialty. Let's adjust the terms. I help you recover everything you've forgotten, and you hand over the 100 refined divine machines. Chapter 524, A Good Show, Update 1. Can you help me recover my memories? Lucian asked, his voice calm but insistent. At those words, Ma Shanhong's head snapped up, excitement flooding his face. If you can restore what I've lost, he said, voice trembling, I'll give you anything you want. He took a steadying breath and began his story. I fell in love with mechanical arts as a child. My great-grandfather, master of magical machinery, took me under his wing. He taught me how to weave enchantments into engines, how to make gears dance at my command. He called me his greatest prodigy. But when I was 15, disaster struck. An unexpected attack severed his leg, and he was rushed to the hospital. Between surgeries, he spoke of the 8 wonders, legendary artifacts said to hold the power to reshape the world, and vowed to lead our family to them for our salvation. Then, on the day we left the hospital, climbing into that waiting car, something inside me snapped. My memories vanished. When I came to again, I was utterly alone. That's when I met Ku Tong. She found me wandering the streets, lost and nameless, and claimed me as her brother. She gave me a home and never stopped searching for my family. When she finally uncovered their fate, she shared with me her grand vision, a world where every person is transformed into an alien. No more borders, no more discrimination, no more bloodshed for power or inheritance, just unity. Ma Shanhong's eyes blazed with determination. If you can bring back who I was, if you can show me my past, I swear I'll grant you any favor. Lucian studied him for a long moment. Here was a man whose entire life had been shattered, driven by a dream of transcendence, and bound to secrets more dangerous than he yet realized. All right, Lucian said at last. I'll try, but I won't make any promises until I know the risks involved. He turned away, already formulating a plan. Somewhere in the lost fragments of Ma Shanhong's mind lay the key to the 8 wonders, and perhaps the darkest truths of their world. The real show was about to begin. Lucian folded his arms and regarded Ma Shanhong coolly. That's why I founded the Yaoxing Society, to help stranded aliens untangle their knots and reclaim their lives. And the perfect self-cultivation furnace I built? It serves 2 purposes. First, to repay my sister's kindness and support her dream of building our ideal nation. Second, far more crucially, to restore my lost memories and reunite me with my grandfather and family. He stepped forward, eyes glinting. If you can help me recover what I've lost, even if it's only a fragment of my past, I'll hand over every single magical tool I've ever made. The divine machine, 100 refinements alone should be enough. Without another word, Lucian pressed his palm to Ma Shanhong's brow. A ripple of psychic energy passed between them as Lucian's formidable mental powers pierced Ma Shanhong's spiritual defenses. Within moments, Lucian was sifting through his host's hidden memories. This is fascinating, Lucian murmured. A sealed memory, yet hardly impenetrable. He paused, frowning thoughtfully. I've studied the nature of memory. It's woven into the very fabric of the soul. You can obscure it, suppress it, but you can never truly erase it. As Lucian delved deeper, more fragments of his vanished past began to stir, promising the answers he'd sought for so long. Lucian closed his eyes and focused. Even after reincarnation, it's always possible to recover memories from a past life. What most people call wiping simply seals those memories deeper in the soul. With enough skill, you can break the seal and bring them back. Ma Shanhong's memories had been buried exceptionally deep, but for Lucian, that was no obstacle. Unseal. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but the mental barrier shattered instantly. A surge of recollections flooded out. Lucian gave a half smile. Bravo, a marvelous little performance. written, directed, and acted entirely by yourself. He sifted through the freed memories, absorbing now them all. As he finished, he exhaled in quiet amusement. Right from the start, something about Kutong's story had felt off. Claiming to be the heir of the 8 wonders and arriving solely to save Ma Shanhong's family? The coincidence was too neat, too theatrical. Lucian shook his head. It was a facade, one he intended to expose. Lucian studied the dossier spread across the table. His eyes narrowed as he read the summary aloud. The Ma family managed to stay hidden for decades. The moment they were exposed, you struck, and every last member was captured, except for Ma Shanhong, their most talented scion. Normally, a raid like this ends in total apprehension or total annihilation. There's simply no reason to spare one survivor, unless you needed someone you could control. He tapped the page for emphasis. Ma Shanhong was young, sheltered, and thoroughly indoctrinated by Kutong over the years, so he never sensed anything was off. If he'd possessed Zhang Chulan's sharp instincts, he'd have seen the trap from a mile away. Lucian flipped to the next section, which outlined Kutong's real objective in stark detail. His lips curled into a contemptuous smile. Kutong dreams of dismantling the entire existing order, erecting a new regime in its place, and transforming every last human into a mutant. Such grandiose ambitions don't come from a balanced mind, they arise from fanaticism. People who think this way don't just entertain extreme ideas, they act on them without hesitation. Remember Magneto? He once pursued a mutant-dominated world so obsessively that he wasn't above sacrificing Mystique, his closest ally, to achieve it. By comparison, Kutong's plan is nothing but a child's fantasy. Lucian closed the dossier. The stakes had never been clearer. If Kutong's vision went unchallenged, humanity itself would be at risk. And Ma Shanhong, the unwitting pawn, was at the very center of the scheme. Moreover, even if it were possible to turn every ordinary person into a mutant, it wouldn't eradicate social classes or underlying conflicts. Tragedies would still occur, perhaps even more frequently. After all, what's the difference between a world where everyone is an alien and one where everyone is a mere human? Unless humanity somehow attains sainthood, self-interest will always breed disputes, and the weak and kind-hearted will continue to suffer. Transforming ordinary people into aliens changes nothing but their outward forms. Deep within Ma Shanhong's sealed memories, Lucian witnessed Kutong directing her operatives to intercept the Ma family just after they were discharged from the hospital. First, she personally wiped their recollections of the 8 wonders and of Ma Shanhong himself. Then she extracted that same fragment from Ma Shanhong's own mind. Her aim was as clear as it was ruthless. She had recognized Ma Shanhong's talents surpassed even those of Ma Benzai, and she intended to harness his unwavering resolve to find his family. By doing so, she hoped to forge the perfect self-cultivation furnace, one capable of refining ordinary people into truly extraordinary beings. Lucian stared at the shattered illusion he'd been chasing and realized his original dream of raising every ordinary person into an extraordinary cultivator might never have been achievable. In truth, he'd been driven by a far more practical goal, to assemble a legion strong enough to oppose Nadatong and the great sects. The Yaoxing Society's influence alone could never stand against both the conglomerate and those ancient powers. A strangled cry broke the silence behind him. "Sister, it was you all along? Why? Why did you do this to me?" Ma Shanhong collapsed to his knees, memories storming back in a brutal wave. Every tender moment he'd cherished, every word of guidance she'd offered, it had all been an elaborate ruse. His beloved sister had toyed with him for years, crafting a life built on lies. Lucian did not spare him a glance. "Our agreement is fulfilled," he said coolly. "I have the divine machine's 100 refined arts." With a flick of his hand, he activated a teleportation array and vanished. The broken bond between Ma Shanhong and his sister was no concern of his. Their transaction had been clean and straightforward. Now that he possessed the legendary refinements, Lucian's path lay clear. His next destination was Kutong. His original plan, to press on to the Lu family in search of the legendary twin-hand technique, remained fully in play. Lucian paused to consider the origin of the blue hand technique Lu Liang once wielded. It was an heirloom of the Lu family. Yet, after delving into Ma Shanhong's memories, he realized there was someone far better suited to help: Kutong. The Lu clan might well have its own red hand style, but it could never match Qutong's mastery. As the daughter of Duan Mu Ying, the original creator of the twin hands, her knowledge was unsurpassed. Satisfied with his decision, Lucian slipped away. No sooner had he gone than Ma Shanhong's agonized cries rang out across Biu village. A crowd gathered at once, worried villagers, Qurang, Zhang Chulan, and a few others drawn by the haunting wail. "Master, what's wrong?" Qurang blurted, rushing to Ma Shanhong's side. Zhang Chulan edged forward as well, concern darkening his eyes. After a long, tense moment, Ma Shanhong forced himself upright and fixed Zhang Chulan with a weary stare. "Zhang Chulan," he rasped, "I'm prepared to lead the villagers in laying down their arms and submit to the company's terms, but you must promise me two things." Relief and joy flickered across Zhang Chulan's face. "You're awake at last, nephew," he exclaimed, clasping Ma Shanhong's shoulder. Yet beneath that happiness, a single thought hovered in his mind. Could all this have something to do with Lucian? Chapter 525. You've been exposed. Second update. Ma Shanhong had always despised the company. Every time its emissaries came calling, he'd turned them away without a second thought. Their only connection was blood. Both he and his nephew were descendants of the legendary Eight Wonders, and even that tenuous bond hadn't been enough to soften him. Until now. His sudden decision to cooperate was baffling. The only plausible explanation was that someone had strong-armed him into submission. And who else could it be but the mysterious, fearsome Jin Bao Bao? Since arriving in Biu village, Jin Bao Bao had been amassing secret techniques from every sect and clan under the sun. It made perfect sense that he would reach out to a powerhouse like Ma Shanhong. With a calm, almost conspiratorial tone, Ma Shanhong beckoned his nephew forward. "Lucian," he said softly, "just tell me what you need." Behind them, Zhang Chulan closed the distance and gave Ma Shanhong a reassuring pat on the shoulder. He shot a quick wink at Wang Zhenchu, who wasted no time dialing up Erzhuang. "Alert the High Council," he instructed. "We may hate to use force, but if Ma Shanhong and the 12 upper roots are in play, we have no choice. Besides, talents of his caliber are exactly what the company needs to mass-produce magical artifacts. With our gifted operatives and those tools, there's almost nothing we can't handle." And so the gears of power began to turn. This time, in concert with forces Ma Shanhong had always shunned. The only question was what Jin Bao Bao had promised to earn his allegiance. Lucian sat quietly in the glass-walled conference room, slowly tracing the rim of his teacup as he considered his next move. If he volunteered to surrender to the company under reasonable terms, he was confident they'd accept. After all, nothing he'd done crossed the line into criminal territory. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent temporary agents rather than their own security detail. And with an influential friend already inside the organization, he held the leverage he needed. Now that he understood every thread of the plot, Lucian's plan was clear. First, strengthen his cultivation, then climb the company hierarchy on his own merits. In time, he'd wield enough power to shield Feng Bao Bao if her secret of extended longevity ever came under threat. He set his conditions out calmly. 1. Chen Duo's safety. "Chen Duo is under my protection," he told the silent executives. "I will explain precisely what happened that day, and I bear her no ill will. My first condition is simple. Do not harm her in any way. 2. Investigation into Qutong. My second demand involves Qutong of the Yaoxing Society. She commissioned me to build the self-cultivation furnace, and her influence, both public and covert, is vast. Her ultimate aim is to overthrow the existing order. You need to open a thorough inquiry into her network and her true intentions." Lucian leaned forward, meeting their steady gazes. He knew these terms weren't excessive. In fact, they served the company's interests as much as his own. If they agreed, he'd turn himself in willingly, ready to answer for his actions. In return, he'd secure his allies' safety and ensure that one day, when he held the real power, no one would threaten the people he cared about. "I need you to help me save my family from her." Lucian's voice trembled with a mixture of resolve and desperation. For years, Qutong had played him, twisting every truth until Lucian's world had been shattered. Now all he wanted was to confront Qutong and find his parents. Yet common sense reminded him that he stood no chance against someone as powerful as Qutong, certainly not on his own, and certainly not while still trapped inside Nadutong's containment jar. His only hope lay in the might of the company. Zhang Chulan glanced over at Wang Zhenqiu. Wang's eyes were glued to his phone. A few seconds later, Wang straightened, closed the device, and offered Zhang a curt nod. Zhang returned the gesture and turned to Ma Xianhong. "The board has approved your request," Zhang said. "Now, start from the beginning. How did Ku Tong abduct your parents?" Ma Xianhong took a steady breath and told them everything, each lie Ku Tong had spun, every secret that had led to the kidnapping. As the details emerged, heads on the boardroom table grew grim. Within moments, Zhang Chulan called for an emergency session. Nadutong's top directors sanctioned the deployment of their elite alien operatives. Orders went out immediately: assemble at the Yao Xingshi headquarters and bring Ku Tong in. Meanwhile, high above the Yao Xingshi tower, Lucian materialized in midair. The city lights glinted off his determined expression as he hovered for a heartbeat. Then, with controlled precision, he descended toward the rooftop, ready at last to face Ku Tong and reclaim his family. The secure channel blinked twice before the message came through. Xianhong's Bu village had been surrounded. Ku Tong set her glass of red wine on the polished marble sill of the floor-to-ceiling French windows, her gaze fixed on the city lights below. "Deploy your men immediately," she ordered, her voice cool as the night air. "If Xianhong is captured, eliminate every escort and bring him to me alive." Behind her, 5 operatives of varying ages and uniforms, each radiating a palpable, raw qi, bowed in unison. "Understood, Director Q," their leader replied, then turned to leave. But Ku Tong's next words froze him. She peered at the window, eyes widening. A single gasp escaped her before the figure outside vanished, only to reappear inside the room, landing as silently as a shadow. "You're Jin Bao Bao," she whispered, every trace of composure draining from her face. Lucian, known in the underworld as Jin Bao Bao, stood before her, calm and unhurried. His dark hair fell across his brow, his expression unreadable. The 5 operatives instinctively moved to interpose themselves between him and their director. He raised a hand. "Please stand down. I didn't come here looking for a fight." Ku Tong's eyes flicked coldly between Lucian and her men. After a heartbeat, she nodded sharply. "Then you'll do exactly as I said. Leave now, or carry out the mission I assigned." A faint, almost amused smile curved Lucian's lips. "My orders come from Mr. Jin. He has particular instructions for you." Silence crackled in the air. Ku Tong knew the name Jin referred to the company's true power behind the throne, and she knew all too well what Jin Bao Bao had already done to the Wang family's enforcers. Now they stood face to face, each measuring the other across a gulf of ambition and vengeance. Outside, the city hummed indifferently, unaware that a storm was about to break. Ku Tong knew full well that even she and her entire force combined wouldn't survive an afternoon against Lucian. As her remaining guards fell back, she flipped her hair over one shoulder and offered him a cool smile. "I'm curious, Mr. Lucian," she said, her tone light. "What brings you here on such short notice?" Lucian met her gaze without flinching. "I came for one thing only," he said plainly. "I want both of your hands." He paused to let the weight of his words settle in. "Of course it's not a demand. Consider it a transaction. You name the price." Ku Tong's composure wavered for the briefest moment. She had indeed struck Ma Xianhong ruthlessly, and rumors hinted at darker schemes still to come, but Lucian had chosen negotiation over outright force. Recovering quickly, she stood and crossed to her wine cabinet. With a smooth flourish, she selected the most expensive bottle on the shelf, twisted off the cork, and poured a generous glass for Lucian. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Lucian," she said, sliding the glass across the marble table. "Your strength and your honor are exceptional. I'm willing to give you exactly what you've asked for. Let us discuss the terms." "I'll need a few days to think it over," Ku Tong said, her voice calm. With Jin Bao Bao's talents, a properly arranged deal could yield her tremendous gains, so of course she wanted to agree. But she wasn't about to commit hastily. A finely honed blade deserved the best steel, and she intended to weigh every option before signing anything. "By all means," Lucian replied, leaning back in his chair. "Take all the time you need." He gave a subtle wave, and the goblet of red wine before him rippled, its contents shifting to a pale, fragrant green tea. Lucian smiled as he lifted the cup. I've never been fond of wine, he confessed. Tea suits me much better. Qtong hid her surprise. She'd hoped to catch him off guard, to bind him under that initial clause. But Lucian's casual acceptance told her that the bullet point she'd been counting on wasn't as dangerous as she'd thought. In fact, seeing him relaxed, savoring his tea rather than pressing for an immediate answer, gave her a quiet thrill. As Lucian set his cup down and regarded her thoughtfully, Qtong began to probe. She asked about his previous ventures, his circle of associates, even the mysterious Jin Bao Bao herself, each question poised innocently enough, yet designed to reveal more than just surface details. All the while, Lucian answered with the same easy composure, leaving her to wonder just how much he was holding back. She still didn't believe that Lucian really was Jin Bao Bao. There was simply no way someone under 18 could possess such extraordinary strength. After a thorough investigation, the company came to the same conclusion. Jin Bao Bao must be wearing someone else's skin, an imposter hiding behind the name. Her plan was straightforward: unmask Lucian's true identity, then use the Shuangquanshao technique to bend him to her will. With someone of his power on her side, the company's entire operation would sail smoothly to victory. That afternoon, she invited Lucian in for tea. He answered her probing questions politely, but revealed nothing. His smooth composure only reinforced her suspicion that he knew far more than he was letting on. Just as she was about to give up, her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted call. The message was chilling. Ma Xianhong has defected to the company. Your cover's blown. They've mobilized a squad of alien operatives. Chances are they're closing in on your location right now. You need to disappear immediately. She placed the cup down so abruptly the porcelain rim trembled. Outside the window, the city's twilight glow seemed suddenly oppressive, as though the world itself was pressing in on her. Without hesitation, she rose to her feet. Her game of deceit had just turned into a race for her life. Chapter 526, I Want to Bear Your Child, Update 1. This can't be happening. Xianhong would never betray me and join that company. Qtong stared at her phone in disbelief. She knew Ma Xianhong better than anyone. Even if someone tried to slander him, he'd always come to her first to verify the truth. There had to be some mistake, a hidden twist she hadn't foreseen. She dashed to the window and looked down. Her heart sank. The company's headquarters was ringed by a full-scale siege force. Heavily armed soldiers, armored vehicles, the works. If her disciples were still here, they could break the encirclement. But she'd dispatched every one of them to Bu Village just hours ago. Now, the company was almost defenseless. No matter how quickly she altered her appearance or slipped away in disguise, once Ma Xianhong joined the attackers, they'd anticipate every trick in her book. A soft voice from behind made her start. You look like you're in trouble. Care to negotiate? Qtong whirled around and froze. Standing in the shadows was Lucian, the brilliant rogue she'd assumed was long gone. His dark eyes shone with calm confidence as he closed the distance. You and I both know what I can offer, he said. Shall we talk terms? I can get you and everyone in your company out of here safely. Not a single one of you will ever be traced back to the company. Lucian rose to his feet, his expression calm. He'd long expected that once the truth was out, Ma Xianhong would hesitate, and upon learning Qtong's true purpose, the company would mount a fierce response. He held no grudges against Qtong. After all, Ma Xianhong had once been his trading partner, but he'd foreseen few alternatives. Qtong paused for a heartbeat, then met Lucian's gaze with resolve. Very well, Mr. Jin, lead us out. Once we're secure, I'll teach you the Shuangquanshao technique. Gladly. Gather your people immediately, Lucian replied. What seemed an insurmountable challenge to others was almost routine for Lucian. Within minutes, Qtong had summoned the key members of the company into the conference room. Under Lucian's direction, they collected every vital document and piece of data, ensuring no critical information was left behind. Ma Xianhong watched from the doorway, aware only of the transaction's surface details. The company's deepest secrets, those she was never privy to, remained safely in Lucian's hands. By the time they finished, the potential losses had been reduced to nothing more than a narrow escape. Lucian stamped the ground, activating the space magic circle beneath his feet. In an instant, the clearing around them dissolved into rippling light, and then reformed into a sun-dappled forest. Towering pines swayed overhead, their needles whispering in a gentle breeze. Qutong brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear and bowed deeply. "Thank you, Lucian. Had you not come, Nadatong's agents would have dragged me in for interrogation." Lucian nodded, his expression calm. "You're safe now. That was our deal, rescue in exchange for payment." Qutong's lips curved into a mischievous smile. She drew closer, eyes glinting. "About that payment." Her hand drifted up to rest on his chest, fingertips grazing the fabric of his tunic. "The dual fist technique isn't something you can learn from scrolls or recordings. It's woven into my very bloodline. You could study every annotated manuscript in existence and never replicate it." Lucian felt a flicker of frustration. He had extracted dozens of martial arts treatises from Nadatong's archives, only to discover them useless without the proper genetic key. Qutong stepped even closer, her gaze steady. "But if we—" She paused, then nodded as though making up her mind. "If you father a child with me, that child will inherit my genes. Only then can the technique be passed on." She glanced at the emerald canopy above them and back to Lucian's face. "My mother, Duan Mu Ying, suffered because of this. The Lu family imprisoned her as nothing more than a breeder, hoping for an heir who could wield the Du, all fist technique. I refused to end up the same way, but you and I, we could ensure our child carries on the legacy without falling into anyone else's hands." Lucian swallowed hard. The wind rustled through the branches, and for a moment all he could hear was the steady thrum of his own pulse. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but Qutong's proposition held the key to a power neither of them could ignore. He met her gaze, thoughts racing. In that silent forest, a new alliance, and perhaps something deeper, was being forged. Every member of the Lu family who has ever awakened the Blue Hand shares a single origin, the blood of Duan Mu Ying. Long before Duan Mu Ying married Wang Zizhong, and well before she gave birth to Lucian, she perfected the Shuangquan Hand, an extraordinary power that would one day surface in their daughter. But her achievement drew the Lu family's covetous attention. When they learned of her child, they imprisoned Duan Mu Ying. To spare both her husband and unborn child, she submitted to their demands. She would bear heirs for them, then die. Her final days were shrouded in sorrow and defiance. When she died, deeply broken in spirit, the Lu family buried her without a name on her tombstone, leaving only an anonymous monument in the Lu clan cemetery. Lu Ci, the clan's current head, had once been infatuated with Duan Mu Ying. Bound by honor and regret, he kept his promise to her on the eve of her death. He sent Lucian abroad, far from the clan's reach, so that the child would grow up safe and free. But Lu Ci never imagined what would unfold. Years later, Lucian not only mastered the Shuangquan Hand's blue side, but also awakened its red counterpart, proof of his mother's legacy and the latent power coursing through his veins. As he grew, so did his understanding of the terrible truth behind his mother's fate and the Lu family's sinister ambitions. Now Lucian has returned to China under the banner of the newly founded Yao Xing Society, driven by two irrevocable aims. First, he will avenge Duan Mu Ying by shattering the Lu family's hold on power, starting with the disappearance of one of their 10 masters, a linchpin in the clan's tyranny. Second, he vows to build a world where everyone shares this alien heritage, so that no one else will ever be hunted or sacrificed the way his mother was. In the shadow of his mother's nameless grave, Lucian prepares to unleash the full might of the Shuangquan Hand and to reshape the world in her memory. Qutong had always nurtured a secret ambition. She'd been raised on her mother's tales of the legendary Wu Gensheng and had set her sights on immortality. If only she could persuade Jin Baobao to father her child, he'd be ensnared by her forever, his autonomy crushed and his loyalty unbreakable. Lucian, however, remained utterly unmoved by her machinations. Before she could finish her plea, he struck with blinding speed, pressing one hand against the side of her head. "Save your breath," he said coolly. "I'll get the answers straight from your mind." Ordinarily, the lethal art of Shuangquan Hand required a formal inheritance, an unbroken transmission from master to disciple. But thanks to the legacy bestowed on him by Xiang Zhenren, Lucian needed only to access the foundational principles. He would reverse engineer the rest in his own time. Fear flickered in Qutong's eyes the moment she sensed his psychic assault. Desperately, she flared her own Xuanquan hand, weaving a barrier of energy between them. She had tormented countless souls, prying into their memories at will, but never had anyone dared to turn that power against her. Too many dark secrets lay buried behind her defenses. Under no circumstances could Lucian be allowed to see them. "What do you think you're doing? Let me go." Kutong's voice trembled with rage and panic as she struggled to repel his intrusion. Lucian allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Naturally, it's the agreed payment for our deal." In the next instant, his psychic energy surged forward, shattering Kutong's mental defenses as effortlessly as a wave breaking thin ice. He breached her mind and began ransacking her memories. Alarmed, Kutong's guards sprang at him, but Lucian only needed a glance to halt their charge. Terrain effect. Gravity well. The air around Lucian distorted as gravity intensified, pinning each attacker to the ground like stakes. They struggled, their limbs too heavy to lift, as Lucian sifted through Kutong's memories. "She's experienced, but this dual fist technique is more potent than I expected." Having extracted what he came for, Lucian casually dispelled the gravity field. Kutong stared at him, furious but powerless. From her perspective, she'd done nothing wrong. Every maneuver had been calculated to protect herself. Yet here she was, taught a harsh lesson by a man who refused to be bound by moral absolutes. In this alien world, just like the clandestine circles of martial arts lore, nothing was purely black or white, only shifting loyalties, hidden blades, and fleeting honor. Lucian had no time to pass judgment. He pocketed the secrets of the dual fist technique and turned on his heel. His objective was complete. Lucian had uncovered countless secrets of the alien world by delving into Kutong's memories, an unexpected boon. Yet nothing had prepared him for the true power of the Xuanquan hand. The blue hand governs the soul. Once fully mastered, it can read and even erase memories, slip into a person's subconscious, implant all manner of thoughts, and bend its victims to the user's will. In fact, it was this formidable blue hand that enabled Kutong to found the Yaoxing Society, a force outside the Ten Lords' domain, in record time. Those aliens the society claimed to rescue invariably became her loyal lieutenants. The red hand, by contrast, rules the flesh and carries boundless healing energy. So long as a spark of life remains, it can mend any wound, cure any disease, and even regenerate severed limbs. No injury is too grievous for the red hand to restore body and blood in the blink of an eye. Chapter 527, Clash of Two Cities in the New World, Second Update. Lucian already commanded several powerful healing spells, but none rivaled the sheer potential of the Xuanquan hand. He knew that once he perfected this technique, he could fuse it with his existing healing magic, his soul extraction and control arts, and even his necromancy. With those combined, the very bones of the undead would pose no obstacle. So long as a soul wasn't trapped or reincarnated, he could rescue it. And if a body was utterly destroyed, he could either reforge a new flesh vessel or craft a magical body and transfer the soul into it. "All right, that's settled. Let's move on," Lucian muttered to himself. Having secured the Xuanquan hand, he saw no reason to linger and, without a second glance, activated his teleportation rune. Kutong groaned as her world spun back into focus. She pressed her hands to her head, teeth clenched in frustration. Anger flared in her chest, but she dared not show it. Crossing Jin Baobao, or worse, challenging Lucian, was out of the question. "This man," she hissed under her breath, "he certainly isn't a gentleman." She conceded that Jin Baobao had drawn a firm line. He would never snatch someone's skills by force. But decency? That, Kutong realized grimly, was quite another matter. She had no choice but to swallow her pride and bide her time. Kutong stared up at the sky, a cold knot of suspicion tightening in her chest. She was convinced Ma Shanhong had betrayed her to the corporation. Otherwise, why would they have sent so many alien agents to capture her? And the timing was too precise. No sooner had Jin Baobao arrived than Kutong's life was imperiled, and only Baobao's intervention saved her. "Locate us," Kutong ordered. Her lieutenant fished out a tracking device, tapped a few commands, then scratched his head. "We're on a small island off the coast of New York." Kutong's frown deepened. Stranded hundreds of miles from home was no accident. It was a lesson in restraint. She'd made her point. Now to see how long it would take them to return. Elsewhere, Lucian materialized at the Jiajia village martial arts school just outside Xi'an. The remote island hadn't killed him or his companions, thanks to Kutong's careful measures, but getting back would cost them dearly in time and effort. A fitting reminder, he muttered. And as for Kutong's hopes of having his child, not a chance. Lucian stepped into the training courtyard, where the autumn light glinted off jade statues and wood-polished floors. Today's purpose was clear. He had come to learn the Jia family's famed object control technique. Mastering it, and marrying it to his own metal-shaping abilities, would let him unleash devastating physical assaults. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and felt a surge of determination. The path ahead would be grueling, but once he had command of the Jia art, no force on earth or off it could stand in his way. Lucian sat at his desk, eyes fixed on the array of parchment scrolls before him. So far, he'd mastered 6 of the 8 strange arts. Only the 6th treasury immortal thief and the Daluo cave view eluded him. Of the 2, Daluo Dongguan was by far the trickier to unravel. No matter how he tweaked his tracking talismans, no matter how meticulously he performed divinations, all he received were blurred impressions and half-formed visions. According to his research, Gu Jiting, the Taoist who devised Daluo Dongguan, vanished without a trace in the midst of a deadly ambush by the Sorcerer sect. After the final blow, Gu Jiting simply dissolved into thin air. No one saw him again, and no one could say where he'd gone. Stranger still, the Sorcerer sect's leader, Hu Tu, descended into madness not long afterward. Scraps of recollection and rumors hinted at why. Daluo Dongguan wasn't just a spell, but a method for constructing living energy palaces, akin to the 24 chambers of Tongtian Valley's Qi Bureau, created centuries ago by Ziyang Zhenren. In theory, Gu Jiting transformed his own body into such an energy peel, alas, melding it with the world itself, and thus slipped beyond the reach of any divination or tracking spell. As for Hu Tu's insanity, Lucian suspected that meddling with another man's energy palace had driven him mad. If he ever uncovered Daluo Dongguan himself, Lucian vowed he would master it, carefully and respectfully, so that its power might serve the balance of the world rather than fracture his mind. Lucian studied the ancient scrolls of Ziyang Zhenren with relentless focus. If no other path opened before him, he would have to adapt the cultivation methods of this world into an entirely new system, one born of Ziyang's legacy and his own ingenuity. But the true prize lay elsewhere, the lost art of the 6th storehouse immortal thief, whose originator, Ruan Feng, was said to be hiding on remote Nason Island. Known as the Sage Thief, the 6th storehouse immortal thief represented the summit of life cultivation. Its name referred to the 6 storehouses of the body: liver, heart, spleen, lungs, kidneys, and gallbladder, each serving as a reservoir for vital energy. Mastering the technique perfected the body's internal alchemy. Anything consumed was instantly broken down, its essence converted into qi, and then circulated at lightning speed. The result was a near-immortal physique with astonishing regenerative powers. Even Feng Baobao's legendary immortality derived from this art, though he had since fused it with 8 other rare skills, creating a form of life cultivation that bordered on godhood. Yet Feng Baobao himself cared little for further longevity. He had already transcended the very concept of mortality. Lucian closed his eyes and felt the warmth of Ziyang Zhenren's inheritance stirring at his dantian. His path was clear: journey to Nason Island, find Ruanfeng, and claim the Sage Thief's legacy for himself. Only then could he hope to challenge the forces arrayed against him and shape his own destiny in this world. Lucian, the immortal thief of the 6 vaults, wielded the fortunes of heaven and earth like a banquet plate, drawing in their very life force to endlessly fortify his body. His obsession with physical perfection brooked no limits. In Lucian's view, devouring any being, especially an alien, was the ultimate thrill, even if each gluttonous feast nudged him closer to madness. Thanks to his countless clones and the infinite worlds at his disposal, opportunities for feeding his appetite were literally unending. Should he consume every dragon on the northern continent of fairy tale, his strength would soar beyond imagining. If he could unseal the 10,000 primeval dragons locked behind the Eclipse Gate, then swallow them all, he would ascend to a level no one had ever seen. And that was before he even considered the embryonic seeds of the celestial deities scattered across our Marvel Prime Earth, or devouring Ego, the living planet and biological father of Star-Lord. Yet, despite such cosmic ambitions, Lucian had struck a bargain with the martial artist Ruan Feng. To honor that agreement, he first needed to master the elusive double-handed technique. Only once his own skills were refined could he hope to guide Ruan Feng through the psychological darkness that tormented him and claim his due in return. From Qutong's memories, Lucian unearthed countless secrets, fascinating revelations about Nasan Island's history and the true origins of Trinity Gate. Although Nasan Island remains sealed for the time being, Lucian has used the waiting period to collect additional Taoist techniques and hone the 8 Wonders method he recently acquired. Once the island's gates finally open, he plans to resolve every outstanding matter in one decisive sweep. After only an hour's stay in Jiajia village, Lucian departed, satisfied with the Jiajia object control technique he'd secured through his negotiations. In the weeks that followed, he employed tracking spells and divination to locate several talented practitioners in Quanxing. By probing their souls, he absorbed their unique skills, most notably the invaluable art of borrowing. A month later, Lucian arrived at the Lu family estate and met Lu Jin. There, he negotiated for the 3rd-level reversal of life technique. The terms were exactly as Lucian expected. In exchange for the powerful cultivation method, he agreed to help Lu Jin track down Li Muxuan, the architect of the Sanyi sect's downfall. Thanks to Qutong's revelations, Lucian already understood the Sanyi sect's tragic history and knew that Li Muxuan was hiding on Nasan Island. That knowledge is precisely why he hadn't rushed to the island until now. Now that Lucian has sealed his pact, he's free to journey to Nathan's Island and see his mission through. Over the past month, while gathering martial techniques from sects far and wide and mastering the famed 8 Wonders, a brand new avatar sprang into being. When Lucian's consciousness returned, he found himself lying in a foul creek in Zon, the undercity beneath Piltover. Memories flooded in as the murky water before him split apart. His new body shot upward and landed with a heavy thud on a rotting wooden walkway. He wiped grime from his eyes and breathed in the acrid haze of chemical fumes drifting through the air. Piltover. Zon, he whispered, voice small and hoarse. Is this the world of League of Legends? The boy whose life he'd inherited was named Syl, an 11-year-old orphan from Zon's lower city. His parents had died years ago in the Battle of Piltover Bridge, and Syl had spent his childhood begging in the streets before turning to petty theft to survive. Inhaling the toxic mists that seep through Zon's sewers had finally claimed him, but now Lucian stood in Syl's worn-out boots, ready to write a new chapter. In Syl's memories, Lucian immediately recognized the twin cities of Piltover and Zon from an old anime he'd watched in his past life, The Battle of Two Cities, and linked them to the League of Legends game he'd played so often. This world is brimming with magic, he thought. Its power runs deep. At first glance, Piltover and Zon didn't strike him as especially formidable. Seen on their own, they seemed merely 2 industrious cities, Piltover, the gleaming hub of invention and progress. Zon, its polluted underbelly crammed with alchemists and tinkerers. But when you step back and consider the world beyond, their true place and their potential vulnerabilities come into focus. Even though Lucian's knowledge of Runeterra came solely from League of Legends, that game had given him a surprisingly clear outline of this realm's geography, its magical currents, and the uneasy balance between progress and peril that linked these 2 great cities to the wider world. Chapter 528. Jinx and Wei. Lucian surveyed himself in a nearby puddle, then flicked his wrist. A soft glow bloomed around him as the grime and rips in his clothes vanished, replaced by crisp, unmarked fabric. Memories of countless past lives surged through his mind, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of this League of Legends multiverse. Here lay not only the material realm and its spirit's domain, but also the inverted void, primordials and voidborn, titanic gods, elemental demigods, ascendants, and myriad other lineages, far grander than any universe Lucian had known before. He straightened his shoulders. First stop, a bookstore. I need to learn everything I can about Runeterra before I decide my next move. To this point, his understanding had been fragmentary. He knew that in the beginning, Zalcor the World Forger, the star-casting Dragon King, shaped countless worlds, among them Runeterra. From its fertile ground sprang the first Titan civilization. One of those high Titans grew greedy for Zalkor's power, betrayed his brethren, and blasted off to conquer the stars. But after that era of Titans, Runeterra's history deepened. Magic wove through its people. Ironclad juggernauts clashed with cunning assassins. Frost-wreathed spirits and shadow-tainted revenants stalked the land. And two names, above all others, stood out in Lucian's recovered memories. Jinx, the anarchic marksman of Zaun, whose explosions wrote her legend in fire and laughter. And Wei, the silent swordsman whose blade hummed with elemental fury. If Lucian could track them down, he might unearth the threads tying his own destiny to theirs, and perhaps seize the fate that had eluded him through so many rebirths. He crossed the cobbled street toward a brass-lettered sign swinging in the breeze. Old Session's books and tomes. Apprentices flickered in and out of vision as they hustled scrolls between shelves. Arcane vapors drifted from open grimoire pages. Lucian's eyes gleamed with purpose. Knowledge lay within those walls, knowledge he would wield like a blade. With a final steadying breath, he stepped inside. Each footfall on the polished floor echoed like a promise. The story of Runeterra was about to unfold before him, and with it, the power to reshape his own. Lucian stared at the cracked page before him, trying to piece together centuries of half-forgotten lore. After the Titans withdrew, humanity rose from the ashes. The three Ice Sisters forged the Iceborne Empire and waged war against the Void Watcher. Shurima blossomed into its own great civilization. Darkened separatists tore at the world's seams. An empire bathed in shadow fell, and the Rune Wars sundered nations once more. He'd read of these eras in scraps of a tattered codex, but details eluded him. His other self, a child born of a doppelganger experiment, could barely afford a scrap of bread, let alone schooling. Lucian knew Zaun's lower wards intimately, but he'd never ventured up to Piltover's gleaming heights. If only he could find a reliable bookstore in the little town district, Xiacheng, to fill in the blanks. Lost in thought, he barely noticed the shrill cry until it was almost on top of him. A little girl with cropped blue hair came hurtling down the alley, her thin frame bent under the weight of a faded backpack. Behind her, a rough-looking teenager barreled forward, face twisted with greed. "Hey, girl, drop the loot, or I'll make you wish you hadn't run," the older boy snarled. The air crackled around the girl's shoulders, a faint pulsing glow that set Lucian's blood humming. He recognized that signature energy, the same unpredictable spark that fueled Zaun's worst calamities. Such street-level extortion was hardly unusual in Lower Zaun, where desperation and sorcery mixed into a volatile brew, but that faint arcane aura told him this wasn't an ordinary mugging, and it was about to get far more dangerous. Lucian hadn't planned to get involved. His sole aim was to gather information, but the strange arcane energy pouring from the girl's satchel made him freeze. If his memory served, she was Jinx, and inside that bag lay the Hextech crystal she'd stolen from Jace back in Uptown. Hextech, magic fused with machinery, was a fascinating prospect. Jinx sprinted past him just as a hulking teen lumbered into view, hot on her heels. On impulse, Lucian swept out a foot, sending the boy sprawling across the pavement. The bully hit the ground hard, but he bounced up almost immediately, his skin unnaturally tough, Lucian guessed. Instead of chasing Jinx toward the polluted canal, the boy whirled on Lucian, eyes blazing. "Who the hell are you, runt?" he snarled. "How dare you trip me like that? You want to pick a fight, huh?" The bully hesitated, blinking as if something about Lucian looked familiar. It wasn't surprising he didn't recognize him instantly. Lucian's hair was combed, his clothes clean and new-looking, nothing like the ragged street urchin the world once knew. Yet behind Lucian's calm, watchful eyes lay a determination that made even this tough guy pause. Lucian's appearance was startlingly different from the gaunt shell Sheer once inhabited. Years of malnourishment and poisoning had left Sheer's body frail, his skin pale, muscles wasted away to thin, spotted bamboo poles. But upon Lucian's arrival, the stolen body surged to life. Hidden reserves of power awakened, every sinew brimming with energy. Where once stood a sickly frame, now gleamed the polish of flawless jade, an extraordinary aura dancing just beneath the surface. It was that aura which gave pause to the burly street thug trash-talking in the alley. The big kid, his knuckles still white from clenched fists, sneered at Lucian's calm, assured posture. He guessed, not incorrectly, that Lucian was one of those uptown nobles who flaunted wealth and influence. "So you're from uptown, huh?" he jeered. Lucian replied with a single, measured word. "Yes." The bully's face darkened with fury. A vein throbbed at his temple, but he lunged anyway, swinging a savage right hook. Before the punch could land, Lucian's hand shot forward in a precise, almost casual motion. The slap rang like a cracking branch. The thug pitched backward, slamming into the weathered wooden wall. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. In the aftermath of the Rune Wars, magic had become a dirty word. Every nation, from the grandest empire to the humblest hamlet, feared its unpredictable power. None more so than Pi City. Progressive, confident, always seeking the next technological breakthrough, Pi City nonetheless looked upon spellcasters with deep suspicion. And as Lucian stood alone in that shadowed alley, he sensed the currents of that fear swirling around him, heralding trials yet to come. Lucian didn't want to draw any attention yet, so he kept his magic in reserve. Even without it, though, his body, honed by years of disciplined training, far outmatched any ordinary street thug in Piltover. He knew no one here could take a palm strike like his. With that in mind, he stepped forward and struck once. The burly ruffian crumpled to the cobblestones before Lucian even had time to reconsider. "Are you okay?" Lucian called, turning toward the narrow alley entrance. A pair of bright eyes peered out from behind a stack of crates. When the rescued figure saw Lucian's open, steady expression, she crept into the light. "Thanks for saving me," she said, brushing dust from her patched-up jacket. Beneath a tangle of pink hair, her grin shone with relief and mischief. "Don't mention it. I'm Lucian." He offered his hand. She hesitated only a moment, then accepted it with a firm shake. "I'm Jinx." Before they could exchange more than that, a sharp voice rang out. "Jinx, there you are." A young woman with cropped pink hair and a determined glare barreled down the alley, flanked by two burly officers, one broad, one lanky. She skidded to a halt in front of Jinx and immediately began patting her overcoat, checking for scrapes or bruises. Lucian recognized the enforcer at once. "Piltover Enforcer V," he said under his breath. Jinx hurried through a rapid recap of her predicament, how he'd been cornered by that thug until Lucian intervened. V's gaze shifted from Jinx to Lucian, assessing him with cool blue eyes. "You're from Uptown, aren't you?" she said, arms folded. "I don't much care for Uptown folk, but I do care about my sister. Thanks for stepping in." V gave Lucian a curt nod, then turned back to Jinx. "Let's get you out of here before more trouble shows up." Lucian slipped through the tavern's swinging doors and approached the bar. The grizzled barkeep glanced up from polishing a chipped mug. "If you need anything in the lower city, come to Fulgen's Tavern and ask for me," the man said. Lucian shook his head, eyes thoughtful. "I'm not from the upper city. I'm from Demacia, just here on holiday." He'd learned early on that claiming roots in either district would only invite questions. Better to pass as a traveler. Piltover welcomed outsiders, after all, and most merchants never looked beyond today's profit. "Way," the barkeep barked out a short laugh, surprise flickering across his lined face. "Demacia? Vandal told me that's quite a trek. Did you come alone?" At 11 or 12 years old, only slightly younger than Bakugo, Lucian offered a casual shrug. "I like traveling. Piltover and Zon are my first stops." He leaned forward. "Do you know of any bookstores around here?" Wei tapped the bar thoughtfully. "You won't find many bookshops in the lower city, but there's one not far from here, up in the upper city. I can give you directions." Lucian's eyes brightened. Wei snagged a scrap of parchment, scribbled a brief rote, and slid it across the counter. "Follow these steps to Master Lort's antiquarian books. It's just a few streets north." Lucian folded the note and tucked it into his satchel. "Thank you." The last lanterns were lit as he stepped back into the cobblestone night, anticipation humming in his veins. A whole new world of stories awaited him beyond Fulgen's swinging doors. "Come with us. We'll show you the way." Wei paused, then continued. "Down here, most of the shops deal in contraband, especially the alchemy stalls brewing all kinds of potions. The air's terrible, and genuine bookstores are almost non-existent." "Thank you," Lucian replied, inclining his head in appreciation. Together with Wei and the others, Lucian climbed into the nearest steam-driven lift. With a hiss of escaping pressure, the carriage jolted upward, delivering them into the heart of Lower Town's most notorious quarter, the Black Alley. Here, under flickering lantern light, vendors hawked every imaginable and unimaginable commodity, and the crowd pressed in from all sides, eager to buy, sell, or barter for anything at any price. Chapter 529, Conquering Piltover in a Week, Second Update. Lucian strode down the winding lane, flanked by Y's two eager followers. Neither of them had ever set foot in Demacia, and their questions came in a steady stream. "Is it true the walls of Demacia are forged from forbidden magic stone?" one asked. "And what about their dragon riders? They're famous across the continent. Have you ever seen one?" the other chimed in. Lucian offered only vague replies. He'd never actually been to Demacia, but he'd crafted a backstory that sounded convincing enough. Even if his cover were blown, his power would carry him through. "Demacia can be chaotic," he said, "but there's a certain vibrancy to it, almost alive with energy." With that, he turned his attention to the surroundings. They were in Piltover's infamous Black Alley, a canyon of towering, crooked buildings linked by rickety ladders and suspended walkways. Below, a diverse crowd wove through the shadows, soldiers in gleaming plate, hooded mages whispering incantations, street vendors hawking exotic wares. Humans dominated the throng, but now and then a yordle or a Vastaya darted past. Lucian's eyes narrowed. This underbelly of Piltover, chaotic and unpredictable, was exactly the place to make his mark. And within a week, he intended to seize control. Lucian wove through the bustling street market, eyeing the riot of stalls that offered everything from exotic spices to battered war gear, and even animated pets like stone beetles and the fluffy poros he remembered from his old game. Every passerby carried a weapon, their eyes alert for trouble. "The bookstore is that way," Wei said, pointing down a side lane beside the Fugan Tavern, about 300 meters. Lucian nodded, then studied the leather pack slung over her shoulder. "I sense something unusual in your bag," he said quietly. "If you're willing to sell, I'd be very interested. Strange artifacts fascinate me." Wei's eyes glittered at the mention of profit. A few days ago, she and her friends had risked the upper city's patrols to snatch valuables, to supplement their meager coin purses. Now she met Lucian's gaze, curiosity warring with caution. "And what would you offer?" Lucian touched his coat pocket as if to check for coin, then subtly cast transfiguration. The air shimmered, and a solid gold ingot appeared in his palm. Its warm weight and gleaming surface spoke louder than words. "I'll trade you this," he said evenly. "It's more than fair for anything you've got in there that hums with magic." Wei drew in a breath, already calculating her profit. Lucian watched her, mind racing with possibilities. The hex crystals he hoped to study had come from Jace's workshop, their power drawn from the rune crystals future Victor had discovered. Runes, he knew, were the very soul of magic here. With Wei's loot and Jace's craftsmanship, he might finally unlock the secrets of this new world. "Is this enough?" Lucian asked, holding out a hefty gold ingot that gleamed even in the low torchlight. In most worlds, gold was the ultimate hard currency, and Runeterra was no exception. Wei and her companions exchanged approving nods. At once, her hand went to the small bag of hex crystals at Lucian's belt. Then she lifted the ingot herself. "Perfect," she said. She glanced down the narrow corridor of Black Alley, her expression turning serious. "Lucian, remember, this place isn't safe for flaunting wealth. Keep your valuables close. Trust no one you don't know." She paused, eyeing the 11-year-old boy. "With that much gold on you, you'd be a magnet for thieves. Stay within our protection. If you wander into Hilco's territory, you'll lose more than just coin." Lucian swallowed, then managed a grateful smile. "Thank you." Wei tucked the hex crystals into her satchel and hefted the ingot. "Be careful," she warned, before turning to slip into the tavern at the alley's end. Lucian pocketed his remaining copper coins and set off toward the little bookstore 300 meters down the street. Pushing open its worn wooden door, he dropped the coins onto the counter with a clink. Without waiting for a greeting, he wove between crowded shelves, scanning titles and murmuring to himself. At his current skill level in transfiguration, Lucian could reshape gold, gemstones, even rare coinage into forms more useful or more easily hidden. Now all he needed was the right reference book to refine his techniques, and perhaps a few more secrets tucked away in dusty tomes. Lucian had discovered that even magical artifacts, so long as they weren't too intricate, could be reshaped by his transfiguration. What set his technique apart was its permanence. Once he recast an object, it never reverted to its original form when his mana ran low. In effect, he was not merely disguising an item with enchantment, but rewriting its very substance, creating a new rather than borrowing from the old. He knew that if he ever hoped to fashion a pocket world of his own, he would need two core talents, the power to give life and the power to conjure objects from nothing. At present, he was only scratching the surface of the latter. He could barely muster enough energy to raise a mountain or carve a winding river, and true world-building would demand years, perhaps decades, of painstaking study. Still, Lucian was undeterred. He already had a plan in motion. When his strength and confidence swelled, his clone in Middle-earth would unite the elven hosts, strike down Morgoth, and then petition the Valar themselves for the ultimate secrets of permanent transmutation. And yet, he felt that even these lofty designs were insufficient. Lucian paused in the center of the cramped upper city bookstore and ran a hand through his hair. He still had no firm leads on how he'd arrived in this world or what powers he might possess here, but one thing was clear: he needed information. The private libraries of Piltover's ancient noble houses and the public collections in the Spire district would be his next stops. He settled at a narrow reading table and began pulling every volume off the shelf. 30 minutes later, he'd finished them all, and emerged with a deeper understanding of Piltover and its shadowed twin, Zaun. Piltover's gleaming towers loomed overhead, choked with clockwork marvels and etheric street lamps. Below, Zaun's smog-laden alleys seethed with outlaw inventors, chem barons, and alchemical workshops that spewed brimstone fumes into the sky. Lucian closed the final tome, a fat compendium on the city's merchant guilds, and let the silence settle around him. He sensed how perfectly his abilities would mesh with this world's arcane technology. He'd already dispatched the city guards in seconds during his first skirmishes. Why limit himself to scavenging scraps of power? He pictured himself in Piltover's Grand Council chamber, signing decrees that bent the City of Progress to his will. Control the council, control the guilds, control the trade routes. From this vantage point, he'd summon whatever weapons or knowledge he needed, no more risking aimless quests across distant lands. A slow grin spread across his face. "In 1 week," he whispered, "I'll claim Piltover, and Zaun beside it. Then every cog and crystal in the City of Progress will be mine." He stood, sliding the last book back onto the shelf. Already, he was mapping out infiltration routes in his mind, the sentinel patrols, the trade house vaults, the hidden entrance to the loom labs. With a plan this bold, there was no room for hesitation. Lucian stepped forward and pushed the bookstore door open, but froze the instant it swung wide. A tall, dark figure blocked his exit, backlit by the golden glow of the street lamps. The stranger's cloak was trimmed with intricate hex inscriptions that pulsed faintly. Lucian stiffened, the stolen tome still clutched in his hand. The figure's voice rolled out, calm and resonant. "I wouldn't go any further, if I were you." And in that moment, Lucian realized his fight for Piltover was about to begin in earnest, and that this mysterious guardian would stand directly in his path. "Hell, lo, you're Lucian, aren't you?" Lucian studied the broad-shouldered man before him, then glanced back at Wei and her friends. They stood a few paces behind, each pressing a hand to her forehead in exasperation. A plan was already forming in Lucian's mind. If he tried to seize power by force, he'd not only risk open rebellion later, but also draw wary attention from neighboring realms, and perhaps even the Protoss. Yet an internal dispute between the Undercity and the Overcity, nobody would blink twice. Such clashes were as routine as the tides. "It's me," Lucian replied coolly. "And you are?" "Fandel," the man said with a courteous bow. "I own the Fulgrim Tavern over there, and I'm Wai's father." He shot a reproachful glance at his daughter. "She sold you those blue glass beads, didn't she? I'm afraid they're defective." With that, he placed a heavy pouch of gold coins on the table. "Please, take back what you paid." Lucian arched an eyebrow, but accepted the pouch without hesitation. Fandel's face was genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry for the trouble," Fandel continued. "To make amends, everything you and your companions order at the Fulgrim for the next week is on the house." Lucian tucked the gold into his belt and inclined his head. Your generosity is noted. Thank you. He spared Wai a brief glance. She avoided his eyes, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Lucian allowed himself the faintest smile. The first step of his plan had slipped into place, quietly, efficiently, and without raising a single alarm. Now all he had to do was let the age-old rivalry between the Undercity and the Overcity play its part. Lucian leaned back in his chair and gave the innkeeper a wry smile. So you're saying that, besides the drinks, the meals, and a bed for the night, are all on the house? That's right, the innkeeper replied cheerfully. No extra charge at all. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Really? If that's your offer, how about I sweeten the pot, say 10 gold pieces? Without hesitation, Lucian drew another gold coin from his pouch. In an instant, 8 more identical pieces clinked onto the rough wooden table. The pile of 9 coins gleamed under the tavern lantern's glow. At the sight of so much gold, everyone around the table went silent. Even Fandel, seasoned traveler and no stranger to wealth, let his mouth fall open. Wai and the others exchanged startled looks. None of them had expected this unassuming boy to be so flush with cash. The innkeeper blinked, recovered his composure, and bowed slightly. 10 gold it is. You won't regret it. As the innkeeper bustled away to arrange their accommodations, Lucian tucked his pouch back into his cloak. He met Fandel's astonished gaze and simply shrugged. Sometimes, it paid to be prepared. Chapter 530, Lucian, who remained sober after 1,000 cups, Part 1. It can't be a runaway noble from Demacia, Fandel muttered as he set another gold ducat beside the 9 already in Lucian's palm. It's not about the money. Those hex crystals came from the upper city. If you won't hand them over, you'll drag us and yourself into serious trouble. Lucian smiled and slipped the 10th coin into his pouch. Then, with a calm flick of his wrist, he produced the small leather bag of hex magic crystals and laid it in Fandel's eager hands. Fandel's eyes gleamed, but he had no idea how naive he sounded. The real power brokers uptown cared little about these crystals' true potential. They hadn't yet grasped their value. What truly alarmed them was the fact that someone from the lower town dared to bring them across the boundary. That kind of provocation, if left unpunished, would only encourage more defiance. And if the nobles chose not to make an example of Lucian, the smoldering tensions between upper and lower would flare up again, risking a repeat of the nearly catastrophic war from a few years ago. Fandel gave the bag a satisfied tug, then straightened his shoulders. Good choice. If your origins are as humble as you claim, you'll want to keep your nose clean uptown. Cross us again, and you won't get off with just a warning. Lucian tucked away his remaining coins, his expression wry. He had expected this reception. Anyone who carried hex crystals beyond Lower Town would, yet he felt scarcely a twinge of regret. In a world where alliances shifted as swiftly as sand, coins and crystals were merely pieces on a board. What mattered was staying one step ahead. As Fandel and his men melted back into the flow of Uptown's busy street, Lucian glanced at the horizon, where the setting sun painted the city in gold and shadow. The evening air carried lantern light and distant laughter, reminders that, for now, the fragile peace still held. But Lucian knew better than to take it for granted. After all, he'd built his reputation on defying expectations. Even 1,000 cups of ale couldn't sober him up, yet here he was, clear-eyed and ready for whatever move came next. Lucian watched Fandel tuck the final magic crystal into his pocket with a tense smile. Even if you hand these over, he said quietly, Uptown won't back down. But that's fine. I need this friction. It'll help me solidify my hold on Pie City all the sooner. Fandel's shoulders relaxed, and he nodded. Thank you. If you're going to be spending time in the alley, just say the word. Any trouble, I've got your back. By the unspoken code of the Black Alley, once a deal was done, money handed over, goods delivered, it was final. No matter how powerful the buyer or the merchandise, nothing could be demanded back. Fandel, as the alley's de facto rulemaker, couldn't enforce a reversal of his own terms. Lucian knew this. If he chose not to reclaim the crystals, it was out of Fandel's hands. Lucian turned on his heel toward the exit, then paused. He raised his voice so that the half-dozen burly white guards flanking Fandel could hear as well. I've heard the grapefruit rum at Forgan's Tavern is exceptional. Mind letting me sample a glass? Fandel chuckled, the sound echoing off the narrow brick walls. Of course, I'll mix you a special supreme batch myself, but truth be told, it's potent stuff. You sure you can handle it? To Fandel's eyes, Lucian still looked no older than a street urchin, roughly the same age as Bangbao, yet he spoke with the poise of a seasoned operator, all calm confidence and quiet menace. With one last nod, Lucian stepped out of the shadows, ready to see just how strong that rum and his own resolve could be. Lucian strode past Fandel and into Forgan's tavern. Fandel looked up from his bench, bleary-eyed. You think you can outdrink me? I haven't even broken a sweat yet. Name your poison, and we'll go another round. Lucian smiled coolly. Don't underestimate me. Let's see what you've got. The challenge was on. 3 hours later, the tavern was alive, with laughter and the clatter of emptied mugs. Fandel lay face down on the table, gently snoring beneath a small mountain of goblets. Across from him, Lucian sat upright, cheeks flushed and vision unsteady, but still very much awake. Wei and Bangbao, the two sisters who ran the place, exchanged triumphant nods and gave Lucian a thumbs up. The other regulars, grizzled barflies known for their own legendary capacity, couldn't help but stare in awe. None had ever seen Fandel fall under the table before, but here he was, completely bested by this wiry newcomer. One of the tavern's burliest patrons let out a roar of laughter. When Fandel wakes up, he's going to wish he'd never met you, kid. No one truly blamed Fandel. He was still the top drinker in these parts. But from that night on, the memory of his defeat became the bar's favorite joke. And as the crowd raised their mugs to Lucian, cheers rang out. Well done, boy. You really are unstoppable. If you manage to floor Fandel, Brother Lippard, I'll meet you in the alley later if I need anything. Every burly patron in Forgan's tavern knew exactly who Lucian was. Around here, respect is earned one of two ways, with your fists or with your liver. The toughest fighter rules the roost, and Fandel's reputation for throwing heavy punches was unmatched. But when no one wanted to break bones, they settled disputes over mugs and jugs, and until recently, Fandel held the drinking crown as well. Now that title belonged to Lucian. For 3 hours, the tavern had roared with excitement as these two titans downed one flagon after another. Glasses clinked, bets flew, and every onlooker was certain that the next round would decide the undisputed champ until the noise abruptly died. The front door slammed open. In glided two figures in striking blue uniforms, their faces obscured by gas masks. The warmth in the room vanished in an instant, replaced by cold suspicion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Damn, Uptown's rats, someone spat. Wai's jaw tightened. She tugged her sister close, pulled up her hood, and melted back into the throng, hoping to stay out of sight. Chapter 7. Shadows in the Uptown. The tavern door burst open, banging against the wall with a crash that rattled mugs from their hooks. A column of primal guard, Piltover's finest, poured through the entrance, their oppressive gas masks still sealed tight. The acrid haze they carried trailed in their wake, setting every patron's nerves on edge. Leading them was a tall, broad-shouldered officer. He ripped off his mask, letting it clatter to the floor. Gray eyes cold as steel swept the room. "Where is Fander?" he demanded, each word dripping with contempt. From every corner of the ramshackle hall, Lucian's hired strongmen, huge, scarred types more accustomed to back-alley brawls than polite conversation, shifted to their feet. Knuckles whitened around tankards, blades peeked from scabbards. If Lucian hadn't warned them not to strike the upper city's enforcers, these two guards would have been torn to pieces by now. Before tension could snap, a commanding voice cut through the din. "That's enough, Rafferty." Captain Grayson of the Piltover Guard stepped past the male officer, her leather coat swirling like a shadow. She knelt beside Fander, who lay slumped against the hearth, blood seeping through his sleeve. Grayson's brow furrowed as she took in his wound. Rumor had it the city council had issued a lethal decree. Any thief causing a stir, Uptown was to be captured dead or alive, a warning to every street urchin and scoundrel in Piltover. Grayson eyed the room, her tone icy. No one move. Not a muscle. In that flickering firelight, the fate of Lucian and his ragtag band hung by a thread, severed only by the sharp edge of Piltover's justice. Sergeant Helena Gray knew better than most that the fragile peace between Upper City and Lower City had been won at too high a cost to risk another outbreak of violence. She'd made a private pact with Fandel, the undisputed head of Black Alley. As long as no one from the lower district stirred trouble above the river, she'd look the other way at their underground dealings. But tonight, word had come that a gang of lower city cutthroats had attacked a student dormitory in the college quarter. To placate the council without drawing steel, Helena decided to give Fandel the chance to turn over the culprits himself. She arrived at his makeshift stall only to find him slumped face first on a crate, utterly drunk. Fandel's 3 sheets to the wind, observed Marin, Fandel's oldest friend and proprietor of the Sundry Spices shop, as he hurried over with a kindly frown. "What brings you here at this hour?" "We're here for Fandel," Helena said evenly. "He needs to hand over the men responsible for the attack." A burly guard standing behind her snorted in irritation. "A group of gutter rats broke into the college dorms and roughed up half a dozen students," he added, voice dripping with contempt. "Council wants them delivered, alive. Hand over those street urchins, or our squad will flatten your entire alley." A wiry thug sneered back, knife flashing in his fist. "You heard me, pig. Cross me, and I'll gut you first." Before anyone could lunge, Marshal Hawk, his service pistol already drawn, barked, "Hold it right there." At that, the tavern fell into tense silence. Old grocer Delmar Myers stepped forward, flanked by Sergeant Grayson. Myers dropped a small leather pouch onto the counter with a soft thud. "Here," he said, voice calm. "This is what was stolen this morning. As for those street kids, they'll be dealt with and banned from uptown for good. Let's call it settled." He reached into the pouch, withdrew a handful of glittering magic crystals, and handed them to Grayson. Those crystals had belonged to Lucian, a grudging bribe to end the standoff. Locked in a low-voiced exchange, the two of them conferred for a moment, but Grayson's expression remained unyielding. She tucked the crystals into her coat and shook her head. "No," she said firmly, "we're not done. If you won't bring those children in willingly, next time you'll be facing the entire precinct, not just the two of us." A cold hush swept over the tavern. The thug's blades lowered halfway, and even Marshal Hawk hesitated, finger still on the trigger. All eyes turned to Lucian. With the fate of the street urchins, and everyone else in that alley, resting on his next move, he drew a slow breath and prepared to choose his path. Chapter 531. Speak Up Against Injustice. Second update. It's them. I recognize those faces. A city guard named Marcus had just glimpsed Lucian and Wei slipping through the crowd and shouted the alarm. Wei's heart pounded. If they were caught now, it would tie back to Vander, digging all of them into deeper trouble. She seized Lucian's hand and bolted for the tavern's back exit. Grayson and Marcus sprang after them, but the tavern's bouncers instantly cut them off at the door. One burly enforcer stepped forward, voice low and menacing. "You've had your fun. Now you're all under arrest." Marcus didn't hesitate. He leveled his pistol, only to have Grayson grasp the barrel. "Marcus, hold it," Grayson hissed. "We don't have the manpower for a brawl here." Marcus slammed his gaze onto the nearest bouncer, fury etched across his face. "I don't care," he snapped, and fired into the man's thigh. A roar of outrage went up as the other bouncers sprung into action, rushing forward to protect their comrade. In an instant, the cramped alley behind the tavern became a battleground. Lucian and Wei, hearts racing, knew they had to act, and act now, if they were going to make it out alive. The shopkeeper's frantic shouts went unanswered. Across the room, Lucian, calm and composed, allowed a faint smile to play at his lips. He'd quietly tampered with Marcus's pistol so that when Marcus finally dared to pull the trigger, it would harmlessly click without firing. And as for Vander, he wasn't out cold from drink at all, but under the influence of Lucian's carefully cast coma spell. Marcus, for all his swagger, was no fool. He wouldn't really open fire when outnumbered. He simply wanted to intimidate, unaware that Lucian had already rigged the gun to deceive him. Vander, too, never lost control by drinking. Lucian's enchantment had rendered him unconscious at the crucial moment. With Vander neutralized and Marcus's gun useless, Lucian's hired strongmen moved in. Inside the cramped tavern, Marcus and his companion Grayson tried to fight back in close quarters, but they were quickly overpowered, knocked to the floor, and bound. The shopkeeper's last-ditch efforts to intervene kept the situation from turning truly savage. Otherwise, it's likely the two would have been cut to pieces. Lucian rose, his plan complete. Vander helpless, Marcus and Grayson dispatched, and the shopkeeper silenced. The balance of power in the room lay entirely in his hands. "This is a huge problem," Lucian muttered, staring down at Grayson and the two others, sprawled unconscious and bruised on the tavern floor. Across the room, Vander was still passed out on the table, snoring softly. The old grocer pressed his hands to his temples. He had no idea what to do next. "I've had enough of this," Lucian continued, voice trembling with frustration. "If it comes to it, I'll take them on myself." At those words, Vander's kinsmen, half a dozen burly men who treated Wei and Bao Bao like their own, exchanged eager grins and rubbed their knuckles together. No one here looked like they were afraid to fight. Lucian straightened. "Wait, have you forgotten how many of our people died 6 years ago? Do you really want to risk another bloodbath?" One of the larger men slammed his fist into his palm. "So what? We've already stood up to them once. We're not handing over those children just to calm down the upper city officials." Voices rose in heated argument, but the crowd's anger only made a solution more distant. Lucian strode over to Vander's table and shook the big man's shoulder. "Wake up, Vander! We need you!" Vander groaned but did not stir. He'd clearly had one too many. Lucian sighed in defeat. "All right," he said warily, turning back to the group. "If it comes to the worst, I'll take the blame. I'll say it was my decision alone." Just then, the tavern doors swung open. Wei walked in, flanked by her friends, her expression calm but resolute. She paused in the doorway, taking in the tense assembly, and then stepped forward, ready to speak her mind. Vander had declared herself the leader, and a leader must bear the consequences of her choices. Everything had spun wildly out of control, and she refused to let Vander or any of these old hands die on her account. "No," she said firmly, "I won't stand for this." The burly enforcers bristled at her refusal, and even the grocer, always quick to side with Vander, shook his head. He was certain Vander would never deliver Wei into the authorities' hands. Just then, the tavern door slammed open, and a panting lookout stumbled in. "It's bad," he gasped. "The upper city constabulary has moved in force. They crossed Piltover Bridge 10 minutes ago and are headed straight for Black Alley." "Figures," Lucian muttered, eyes narrowing. It had been only 6 years since the Lower City Rebellion. Grayson might trust Vander, but he wouldn't be caught off guard. And Vander wasn't the only major player down here. The ruthless, cunning Hilco still controlled half the streets. Lucian drew a steady breath. "Then we fight." No more words were needed. The brawny thugs hauled Grayson and Marcus to their feet, rallying friends and allies around them for a last, desperate stand against the encroaching lawmen. Lucian turned to Wei and Bao Bao. "You two get Fandel out the back. Keep him safe. We're all in this together." With that, the motley defenders of Black Alley braced themselves. The clang of armor reached their ears, and beyond the windows, torches bobbed in the advancing bluecoat ranks. There was nowhere to run, only forward. Chapter 9. If he wakes, send him over right away. The sundry shop proprietor had no choice but to round up a few wide-eyed street urchins and hustle them through the back alley. As soon as they were out of sight, Wei's jaw clenched. "I can't just stand here," she snapped, stalking toward the widening melee in the square. "Someone has to stop this." Only moments ago, she'd unwittingly stirred the hornet's nest, and now honest folk were getting trampled in the fracas. Shouts and curses echoed off the sandstone walls, and she refused to let innocence pay for her mistake. From the edge of the chaos, Lucian lurched off a battered crate where he'd been half asleep. His dark hair hung in damp strands around a flushed face. Wei threw up her hands in exasperation. "Lucian, this is pointless. Piltover's guards will be storming in any second. You don't belong in the middle of this." He shook off the last remnants of his stupor, blinking against the midday glare. A moment before, he'd landed a solid slap on one of the ruffians, enough to send the man sprawling, but that was a Baroom thug, not the well-drilled enforcers rolling into the square now. Lucian began, voice thick with liquor. Then he squared his shoulders. "Boom once told me I had a knack for turning the tide, that I'm someone worth having on your side." He paused, swaying slightly. "Traveling isn't about me alone, it's about loyalty. Wherever you go, your friends go too." Wei's heart fluttered. His words were grand and dangerously naive. She didn't want him hurt, or worse, hauled off by the city watch. "The law won't show mercy," she urged, stepping forward and tugging at his arm. "Come with me. At least get out of sight until this blows over." Lucian hesitated, gaze drifting back to the pulsing crowd. Weapons glinted in the sun. The clang of armor grew louder. Finally, he took a deep breath and nodded. "All right." Together, they slipped into the tangle of side streets, weaving between frightened vendors and snapping guards. Though the square behind them raged on, in that narrow alley they found a moment's quiet, enough for Wei to hope she'd saved her friend from a fight neither of them could win. "When I see injustice, I'll shout, and when it's time, I'll act." Lucian's roar echoed through Fandel's tavern. He whipped a fist into the stone wall beside him, and with a crack of rock on rock, a jagged opening split the surface. Without pausing, he stepped through the breach and gave chase to the thugs in the alley. Hiss! Inside the tavern, Wei and the others gaped at the gaping fault line. Fandel had wisely forsaken flimsy wood for solid subterranean rock, knowing bar fights were as common as spilled ale. Such walls were nearly indestructible. No one, not even Fandel himself, could have punched a hole that size. "I'm going after him," Wei ordered. "You two get Fandel down to the secret chamber under the cellar. Keep him there. No excuses." With that, he leapt through the blown-out section and sprinted into the night. At the mouth of Black Alley, three forces faced off. On one side, Piltover lawkeepers in cobalt coats leveled long rifles down the narrow lane. Opposing them, the grocer had rallied his own brawny guards, each armed with knives and clubs, and stepping out from the shadows was Hilko, flanked by his brigade of street toughs, drawn by the commotion. The alley crackled with tension as steel met stone, and only one side would walk away. Lucian stood in the shadowed gallery overlooking the courtyard, replaying his calculations. He'd long ago concluded that Fandel's rigid code of honor would compel him to shoulder the blame for the missing children. With that confidence in hand, Lucian had quietly bribed Marcus, set a trap for Grayson, and prepared to seize Fandel himself. His ultimatum was simple: confess to betraying the upper city and fight at Lucian's side once more, or die. If Fandel refused, Lucian would eliminate him, absorb the lower city at his own pace, then march on the upper city to claim it for his own. Everything was in place, until the courier burst through the doors with urgent news. Fandel's forces had stormed Marcus's fortress, captured both Marcus and Grayson, and were now rallying for an all-out war with the upper city. Such boldness was the last thing Lucian had expected. He summoned his captains to the command chamber and studied their faces for hints of treachery. Yet Fandel himself did not appear. The tension in the room was suffocating as Lucian realized that the game had changed. The man he once thought so predictable had struck first, seizing the initiative in a bid for total victory. Lucian's plan now lay in pieces, and the only certainty was the storm about to break over both cities. Winner take all. Chapter 532. I want to beat 10 of them. First update. Lucian strode across the courtyard, the shimmer-cloaked captive trudging behind him, and came to a halt before the supply manager, a portly man with sweat beading on his bald scalp. Without ceremony, Lucian's voice cut through the morning chill. "Where are the vandals?" The manager's Adam's apple bobbed wildly. He swallowed, trying to summon courage. "Master Fander, he's still asleep. He passed out drunk last night. If he were awake, he'd never have let this happen." Lucian cocked an eyebrow. "Drunk?" A flicker of disbelief crossed his face. He'd anticipated fierce defiance, not a tavern tale. Who in the world managed to get a warrior like Fander wasted? The manager's lips trembled. He dared not mention that his lord had been out-drunk by an 11-year-old girl. It would ruin him to have his superiors find out. "It's a private matter," he stammered. "Let's just say he lost a drinking contest to a young child." Lucian's brow furrowed. "An 11-year-old? Please," the manager pleaded, rubbing his sweaty palms together, "just accept that answer. If Lord Fander ever learns I've revealed this, I'll be begging for mercy, merely for losing a bet, let alone to someone so young." Lucian said nothing, his expression unreadable. The manager exhaled, torn between relief that the question was answered and dread over how that secret would change everything. The lead officer across the street raised his voice, every bit the hammer of Piltover law enforcement. "Release Chief Grayson and Marcus this instant. Lay down your weapons and submit to questioning, or today will be your last. Behind him, Lucian, the unassuming grocer turned desperate negotiator, stared down the line of uniformed guards. Calmly, he nodded to his men. In a single, smooth motion they stepped forward, blades at the throats of their two captives. "We'll hand over Grayson," Lucian said, voice steady, "but only if you withdraw right now. Otherwise, no one walks away alive." Neither side wanted bloodshed. With knives pressed to their comrades' veins and rifles trained from across the street, both factions knew that firing a shot would be suicide. All Lucian needed was time for Fandel to awaken and assume control of the situation. Hilko, standing just behind Lucian, finally grasped his mistake. Casting a wary glance at the standoff, he signaled his own men to inch backward. There was no glory in a needless brawl. Better to see the rival forces bleed each other dry before claiming the spoils. The Piltover commander's jaw tightened. "Your terms are absurd. I'll say it one more time. Hand over Grayson and Marcus, now!" With that, he flicked his wrist. Instantly, every Piltover guard leveled their weapons, muzzles pointed unwaveringly at Lucian and his men. They all understood the risk. One stray bullet could kill their own captain, but the show of force was all part of the game. For the moment, neither side budged, knives gleaming in Lucian's grip, rifles aligned in brutal precision. The street held its breath, waiting for the first spark to ignite open war. Lucian reeled into the center of the standoff, just as tensions between the grocer, his hired muscle, and the Piltover lawmen were about to snap. The grocer had stalled for time, threatening force without ever pulling the trigger, while his burly guards brandished their rifles but dared not fire. Across the dusty street, the city enforcers stood ready, fingers twitching on holsters, waiting for any excuse to act. "Hey, you came here to pick a fight with my brother, didn't you?" Lucian slurred, thrusting a shaky finger at the lead constable. "Get lost, or I'll kill you myself!" The officer frowned, about to order the boy dragged off, when something in Lucian's wild-eyed stare gave him pause. He cleared his throat. "Your brother? Who are you talking about?" Lucian lurched forward, one hand on his hip, the other pounding his chest. "My brother's Fandel. Yeah, that Fandel. We drank like true brothers tonight. He might not be bound to me by blood, but he's my brother just the same. You lay a finger on him, you answer to me." He wavered, then squared his shoulders as his makeshift army of grocers, heavies, and enforcers locked eyes across the street. In that moment, neither side dared make the first move. Lucian's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Earlier, he'd plied Fandel with drink until the proud noble stumbled, and in that vulnerable state, Lucian had compelled him to call him brother. That one word forged a bond that now legitimized Lucian's intervention. Without it, he'd be no more than a meddlesome outsider, but with it, he had every right to step into Fandel's affairs. From the edge of the courtyard, Hilko fought to keep from laughing out loud. To see the imperious Fandel, renowned for his arrogance, overpowered by a mere boy in a drinking contest was deliciously humiliating. Hilko could already envision the endless teasing that awaited his rival. And if Piltover's enforcers finally descended on Fandel today, Hilko might well use the chaos to eliminate him permanently. His tactics had shifted, but his ultimate goal, dethroning Fandel's pride, remained unchanged. Panting as he ran, Y caught up just in time to see Lucian stride between Fandel's guards, the Piltover officers, and Hilko's men, a no-man's land of fierce suspicion. "Lucian, wait," Y called, grabbing his arm. "Don't go in there. Come back." But Lucian stood firm. Whatever came next, he was determined to see it through. Vi strained against the rope, but Lucian's strength was simply too great. Try as she might, she couldn't budge him an inch. "Lucian, Vi, get over here!" the grocer bellowed. He stood frozen behind them, unwilling to take a step forward. He feared that any misstep might spark a full-blown fight. The law enforcement officer narrowed his eyes as he took in Lucian's badge of Fandel and the two youths at his side. "So you're from Fandel, are you? And one of you's the thief who made off with my wares?" He waved his hand, signaling two Piltover guards to advance. "Seize them at once." If they could apprehend these two, they might be able to trade them for Grayson and Marcus. Someone higher up had made that very promise. "Brother Way, stand aside," one guard barked. "Let us handle this." Way planted himself in the guard's path, fists clenched. "Not a chance," he growled. Before the grocer could intervene, Lucian reacted. With a single sweep of his arm, he flung Y bodily against the stall's counter, sending fruit and vegetables crashing to the ground. The sudden move caught everyone off guard and bought Lucian and V precious seconds. Now it was a race. Could they escape the guards before more reinforcements arrived? Lucian. After the grocer hauled Y to safety, she watched in disbelief as two Piltover guards lunged for Lucian's arms. She couldn't believe it. Lucian, who'd once punched a tavern wall clean through, was still reeling from his drunken haze, muttering nonsense and even calling her brother. Everyone froze, until, with a crack and a thunk, the scene exploded into action. Just as the guard's hands closed on him, Lucian's reflexes kicked in. In the space of a heartbeat, he whipped both arms out, delivering two thunderous slaps that sent the guards spinning, one hurtling left, the other right. They crashed to the ground, dazed and unconscious. "Is that really all you've got?" Lucian sneered, straightening up. "You're going to make trouble in my territory with tricks like that?" He cocked a finger in challenge, daring them to try again. One guard's face flushed bright red under his gas mask. Fortunately, no one would ever know he was embarrassed. "Squad 4, take him down!" barked the Piltover deputy marshal. He'd never been so publicly humiliated by a street urchin from Black Alley. Normally he could handle unruly grown men, but a child? And one who'd embarrass him before the assembly? Unthinkable. Lucian didn't flinch. In a single motion he struck. Wham! 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 And the four guards leapt backward, bodies slamming beside the two who'd gone down. Beth, or them. Way in his muscle, ready to rush in, skidded to a halt. They recovered their footing, leveled their weapons, and began cheering. "Ha ha! Lucian's unstoppable! Nicely done, kid! Show them the strength of Black Alley. From now on, everyone answers to you. Well, except Vander. Leopard's got your back." The deputy marshal's face turned beet red. He'd underestimated this boy's power, but shooting a child would only court scandal with the assembly. Through gritted teeth, he snarled, "All right, 10 of you, fire!" Lucian simply grinned, holding up both hands, 10 fingers splayed in challenge. 10 shots? I'll be waiting. Chapter 533. No one can stop a slap. The captain drove his spear into the earth with a roar, teeth bared as he counted off each syllable. "Go, go, go! 10! Their forces were locked in a stalemate, both armies poised for battle, their commander held captive, and morale was already wavering. Earlier, a single child-sized fighter had turned aside 8 of their men with nothing more than a slap. Until word came down from Parliament, the captain knew he had to stop this upstart. At his command, the 10 toughest enforcers in the unit charged Lucian like a pack of ravenous wolves. In an instant, they closed in, intent on overwhelming him through sheer numbers. Then came the sound of flesh striking flesh. Snap, crack, wham! And one by one, the 10 warriors were hurled through the air, landing in crumpled heaps across the dusty field. These were veterans, each capable of holding their own against 3 or 4 attackers. Yet here they were, groaning, disoriented, utterly bested by Lucian's effortless strength. Lucian stood unmoved, dusting imaginary dirt from his sleeve. Around him, the tense silence broke into stunned whispers on one side and wild cheers on the other. The captain's face burned red with rage, but for now, no one could stop a slap. Even with all their strength combined, they couldn't withstand Lucian's blow. A stunned silence fell over everyone, the grocery store owner, Hilko, and the entire law enforcement contingent. Hilko whipped around to regard his secret weapon, the enhanced operative, bathed in a pale, almost spectral light. He'd been certain this super soldier could turn the tide, but now doubt gnawed at him. After all, this man had never in an instant overcome Piltover's top 10 guards. "This can't be happening," Hilko muttered under his breath. Nearby, the lead officer's lip twitched in disbelief. He'd underestimated Lucian once before, sending only average men to subdue the boy, and they'd paid the price. This time he deployed Piltover's finest 10, each moving with painstaking caution to encircle the child. Yet the result was no different. How could one boy, barely past childhood, stand toe-to-toe with seasoned enforcers and a so-called enhanced warrior? Who was this Lucian, really? A Yordle? The notion was absurd. Yordles, like Professor Heimerdinger, the venerable statesman of Piltover's parliament, were unmistakable in appearance. This boy bore no resemblance to any Yordle the city knew. And if he wasn't Yordle, then what? Lucian's appearance belied his true age. Though he stood no taller than a 10-year-old boy, he had already lived 3 centuries. Yodels, a race famed for lifespans stretching into the tens of thousands of years, were readily identifiable by certain features, none of which Lucian displayed. He looked every bit a normal human child. There was no plausible way he could be a Yodel martial master in disguise. At the edge of Black Alley, the precinct captain hesitated. Should he summon more officers to subdue the boy? As he weighed his options, one of his guards hurried up and bent low, whispering into his ear. "Sir, send the message to the other side. Order them to drop their weapons and crouch to surrender immediately." The captain drew himself up, exhaled, and turned to his squad. "All units, listen up," he boomed. "Attack with everything you've got. Anyone who falters or refuses will be executed on the spot." Meanwhile, word of the standoff had already reached the city's parliament. 6 councillors convened an emergency session to review the incident in Black Alley. After hours of debate, 5 of them, every member except Professor Heimerdinger, voted in favor of a large-scale cleanup operation. Their plan: purge the district of perceived threats and restore order by any means necessary. As reinforcements assembled and the council's decision rippled through the ranks, Lucian stood alone in the alley's dim light, calm and unafraid, ready to face whatever came next. Even with Grayson and Marcus facing execution, the people of the lower ward needed a clear reminder. Piltove, R's authority was absolute, and the riot from 6 years past must never be repeated. That rebellion had ended in victory for the upper city, but at a staggering cost. Now, tightly packed ranks of Piltover enforcers advanced, their rifles shouldering glints of steel in the morning light. "Surrender, or you'll be arrested on the spot," one officer shouted, voice echoing off the stone walls. No mercy this time. A handful of burly lower ward fighters stood their ground. With a roar, they charged forward, weapons raised. Hilko, his eyes narrowed to slits, waved his own men back, guiding them to safety just beyond the range of both sides' fire. "Open fire! Don't let them get away," another enforcer snapped. At that moment, Lucian rode to the front of the detachment. He drew a deep breath and bellowed, "Hold your fire, they've laid down arms, stand down and arrest anyone who tries to flee." The guards faltered, exchanging uncertain glances. Perfect. Exactly what Lucian had planned. Every instant of today's clash looked spontaneous, free of hidden agendas. No grand conspiracy, no orchestrated coup, just 2 rival wards at the breaking point, a hot-headed commander, and 1 man drunk on the shout of battle. Only instead of a full-scale uprising, the affair had been gently steered elsewhere. And in that subtle shift, the fragile piece of Piltover held, at least for now. Lucian leaned back in his chair and replayed the night's events in his mind. When everyone looked back on what happened, they'd probably shrug it off as drunken bravado, him going a little too far to help his brother. It was just like any bar fight in the real world. Once someone starts hassling your friend, the rest of you will grab a chair, a bottle, anything at hand, and jump in. Sober, he'd never have acted so rashly. But with half a dozen ales inside him, it felt almost inevitable. Truth was, he'd had far simpler and far cleaner options. He could have strolled into the upper city's council chambers and laid all the councillors under an imperious curse or the hand of the hand. Or he could have bound Fandel in the lower city to his will, rallied his followers, and marched straight on Piltover. With his power, one decisive strike would have brought the city to its knees. After all, Piltover's wealth and influence rested on its trade networks, which funneled in magical tomes, rare runes, and priceless intelligence from every corner of the world. But in a multiverse as vast as this one, paper never covers fire. Flash too much magic in public, and you'll be cast as a villain in every tale that follows. Then the so-called heroes would descend on him, and he'd be forced to duel champions and waste time he couldn't afford to lose. No, he'd learned long ago that the subtler path was the smarter one. Achieve your ends without painting a target on your back. Finishing his drink, Lucian set the empty glass on the table and rose. The night's uproar was behind him, but the real work was just beginning, and this time he'd make sure it was handled with far less drama. Lucian glanced at the half-finished device on his workbench. At the current pace, what he'd thought would take a week might be done in a single day. He cracked his knuckles. Pa, 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 pa! Without hesitation, Lucian surged ahead, weaving through a hail of bullets from the Piltover guard. His gait was unsteady, almost drunken, but every stagger kept him just out of the guard's sights. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance. A single, thunderous slap sent the nearest officer sprawling into a wall. A second blow sent another guard sprawling unconscious to the cobbles. No one could withstand his open-handed strikes. Each man struck went flying and hit the ground in a daze. By delivering that first blow himself, Lucian had split the guard's formation like a blade through cloth. They hesitated, rifles wavering. Should they fire on the breach ahead or on Lucian himself? Seizing the moment of confusion, Lucian's allies, toughs and street fighters long loyal to him, poured into the alley. In seconds, what had been a tense standoff erupted into all-out brawl. Ripples of dust and shouts filled the narrow lane, a grim echo of the day 6 years ago when Lower City's ragtag militia was swept aside by the Upper City's superior technology. Tonight, though, Lucian's crew had the advantage of surprise and a frontman no one could block. While most fighters in the Lower City still clutched crude spears and wore threadbare rags, the Upper City guards advanced with precision rifles and gleaming, reinforced vests. The moment the fighting began, volley after volley of gunfire cut down the spear-wielding defenders. By the time the clash reached Piltover Bridge, only scattered survivors remained. Overwhelmed by the disparity in weaponry and forced to watch his people fall in droves, Vandel blew the retreat. He led the battered remnants away from the battlefield and reluctantly signed a peace treaty with the Upper City, an agreement born of necessity but stained by too many lives lost. In its aftermath, Hilko denounced Vandel as a coward and severed their alliance, convinced he had betrayed their shared cause. Yet in the winding back streets of Black Alley, a very different outcome was taking shape. Under Lucian's fierce leadership, not a single soul had been lost. Word came that the city's law enforcement had dispatched a squad to root them out. When the first guard burst into their enclave, Lucian struck like a viper, his open palm sending the officers sprawling. In the flash of that moment, Black Alley's hardiest men sprang to life, blades and clubs flashing under the dim lanterns. They closed in on the stunned guards, pelting them with cold steel. Under Lucian's command, the defenders fought with grim determination and ferocity. Every thrust and parry drove the city forces back, shattering their advance and proving that, in these shadows, the Upper City's might counted for nothing. Chapter 534, Charge Toward the Uptown District. First update. How is this possible? It's a complete rout. Hilko stood back, eyes widening in disbelief as the once formidable Piltover City Law Enforcement Brigade collapsed under the onslaught led by the drunken Lucian. Wave after wave of elite officers fell back in disarray. At this rate, the brigade that served as Uptown's main bulwark would be wiped out here and now. And if Uptown's defenders vanish, the district will lie open for the taking. Today's triumph could hand Lower City's rebels the prize they've dreamed of for years: freedom from oppression and full access to Uptown's prosperity. A victory like this would be nothing short of miraculous. Hilko's original plan had been painstaking. He intended to seize complete control of Lower City, spend a decade building an alchemy-powered army of enhanced soldiers, and then stage a rebellion strong enough to overthrow the Uptown lawmen. But now, today's battle might render all that long-term scheming unnecessary. With Lucian's surprise assault, the gates to the Uptown district stand ajar, and the time to press the attack has arrived. Lucian surveyed the battlefield with cold determination. He didn't need to wait another 10 years. Today, he would seize the Upper City. "Move out," he ordered, voice cutting through the clamor of steel and shouts. "Overwhelm those sentries, then press on to the gates." At his signal, Hilko drew a wicked dagger and led his dozen men into the fray. They crashed toward the center of the defenders' line, until Lucian met them head-on. In one fluid motion, he slapped Hilko so hard the man spun off his feet and landed in the dirt. "Reinforcements, huh?" Lucian sneered. "Let's see how you handle that." Fury flared in Hilko's eyes. "You dare strike me? Take him down." His men roared and charged Lucian together. But Lucian was ready. He moved like lightning, elbow, knee, and fist, knocking each attacker aside. The so-called enhanced soldier, whose body crackled with shimmering energy, rushed him next. Lucian sidestepped, delivered a precise blow to the ribs, and watched the augmented fighter collapse with the wind knocked out of him. He needed a swift, decisive victory. If Hilco's troops joined the battle and then demanded a share of the spoils, Fandel, ever honorable, ever just, might be forced to concede. Fandel had sworn to fairness, and he would never stoop to treachery. Lucian couldn't risk his commander's integrity, nor the mission's success, so Lucian pressed on, slipping through the broken lines toward the upper city's gates. Each step brought him closer to victory, and to the fate he had chosen for himself and for all who followed him. Let Fandel ascend as Pi City's ruler. We've seen today's moves and the plans he's laid out. He's predictable enough we can keep him in check without magic. Silco, though, is a different story. He's a schemer through and through, brimming with hidden agendas. That's precisely why he was cast out of Pi City's future ruling circle. I don't know what brought you here, Hilco, but I'm drunk and you've come barreling straight at me. Would I treat you as anything but an enemy? If later your brother strikes first, I'll meet him head on. Fair's fair. Meanwhile, old Martin the grocer over by the stalls was felling the last Piltover guard as if he were swatting a fly. He glanced at Lucian, sloshed and fuming, and saw him single-handedly flattening Silco's thugs. Martin wisely kept his distance. The outcome was clear. We didn't need Hilco's help. Better to knock him out now and save ourselves the trouble later. Without Fandel at our back, no one could keep Silco under control. But the real shocker was Lucian's raw strength. Every drunken slap sent another man sprawling. It was unnerving. Next time, I'll think twice before letting him knock back so many drinks. If he causes that much chaos again, we might not have enough hands to hold him down. Lucian's intervention had been their salvation. Without him, countless lower city residents would have died today. Now, as the small key began to clear, the grocery store owner and his burly enforcers exchanged stunned, bewildered glances. Years of pent-up rage against Uptown had taught them only how to vent their anger in Shangcheng District. They'd never truly believed victory was possible. Even now, they stood half convinced the fight was over. Wei would not allow hesitation. She sprang to her feet, eyes flashing with determination. Listen up! Nearly all the Piltover guards are stationed in the upper city. Here, their defenses are all but non-existent. This is our chance. Tonight, we march straight into Uptown. We bring down every last noble, and we finish what we started 6 years ago on Piltover Bridge. 6 years earlier, on that very bridge, Wei had watched her parents fall in a brutal massacre. From that day on, she had vowed to crush Uptown's aristocracy under her heel. Now, bolstered by Lucian's unexpected prowess, they had routed the Piltover garrison in the suburbs. Before the upper city could recover, they would storm the parliament and topple every high-ranking noble. From this moment forward, Shangcheng District's people would no longer hide their rebellion. They would claim their destiny. Should we wait until Fandel wakes up? The question hung in the dim back room of the grocery shop, where battered crates and overturned chairs bore witness to the hectic skirmish that had just passed. Fandel, the shop's proprietor and the secret leader of Black Alley, lay unconscious on a cot in the corner. His breathing was shallow, and no one dared wake him. "It'll be too late by then," protested one of Fandel's lieutenants, voice rough with urgency. "If you won't go, I will." Wei didn't hesitate. She tightened the crimson gauntlets that crackled across her knuckles and turned to Lucian, whose senses were still dulled by the wine he'd drunk in celebration of their narrow victory. "Lucian," she said, voice calm but iron strong, "I need you at my side." Lucian blinked again to clear the haze, and managed a lopsided grin. He stepped forward and wrapped her in a sudden, unsteady hug. "We're brothers in arms," he slurred, but his eyes were sincere. "Whatever you need, just say the word." Wei allowed herself a brief smile. With Fandel incapacitated, she was next in line to lead Black Alley, but the fate of the lower city hinged on their next move. Behind them, the others grabbed discarded Piltover spears and rifled through saddlebags for pistols and grenades. "All right," Wei said, voice rising above the clamor. "Then let's hit them now." She drew a deep breath, letting the familiar surge of adrenaline burn away any lingering doubts. "Follow me." Lucian squared his shoulders, planting his feet. The rest fell in behind as Wei strode toward the heavy steel door. Moments later, they emerged onto the cobblestone street, where torches sputtered against the darkness. Ahead lay the Great Iron Bridge, the only connection between Piltover's gleaming upper terraces and the shadowed alleys below. Wai planted her fist on the hilt of her gauntlets. Sparks danced in the air around her. Lucian hefted a long spear over his shoulder, determination setting his jaw. Around them, Black Alley's ragged defenders braced for the fight to come. "Move," Wai cried, and they charged, vanishing into the night with a war cry that echoed off the metal girders high above. The bridge and the fate of two cities awaited. On the bridge, the Piltover guards who normally stood watch froze in shock as Wai barreled toward them, flanked by a tightly packed legion from the Black Alleys. One guard thrust his spear forward and barked, "Hold back! No one from the lower city may pass into Piltover." But their warning was swallowed by the thunder of armored boots, and the guards were simply overrun. In that instant, the bridge that had long served as a natural moat separating Piltover from Zaun was breached with startling ease. More than 2 centuries ago, there had been no upper and lower city, just one sprawling settlement known simply as Zaun. Born as a modest trad, in-post north of ancient Shurima, it escaped much of the old world's void crises. Yet as Valoran's ports and caravans multiplied, Zaun's coastal position took on new importance. To unlock even greater wealth and establish a direct east-west trade route, the city councilors devised the Gate of the Sun project, forever altering the fate of what would become Piltover and the shadowed streets of Zaun. They detonated vast quantities of explosives to carve a new passage, wide and deep enough for ships to sail freely between east and west. The operation succeeded spectacularly, but not without cost. Each thunderous blast sent tremors rippling through the land, triggering frequent earthquakes that fractured the once solid ground. Sections of the coast heaved skyward, others collapsed, and some were swallowed entirely by the sea. In the end, the upheaval split the region into distinct parts. The uplifted territory became known as Piltover, literally above the Piltover Canal, while the sunken districts retained the old name of Zaun. Chapter 535, Waking from Drunkenness, Has the World Changed? Second Update. Piltover is where Zaun's nobles and merchants gather, while commoners crowd into Zaun below. Piltover commands the continent's land and water routes, its foundations rock solid. With booming trade, its culture and technology flourish like never before. Zaun, by contrast, is packed with laborers who have few ways to earn a living. They devote themselves to chemical and alchemical work, selling their cheap labor to the factory owners of the lower city. As a result, the upper city of Piltover remains orderly, prosperous, and pristine, whereas the lower city lies under a pall of pollution and disease. Factories dump wastewater and refuse into its streets, and alchemical byproducts fill the air with poisonous gases. The contamination is so severe that any Piltover guard venturing below must don a gas mask, an inconvenience that keeps patrols rare. That very neglect has become yet another source of income for the Undercity's residents, a thriving black market in contraband. Piltover's gleaming towers rose above the smog-choked streets of the lower city, where merchants hawked illicit goods in narrow, torchlit alleys. 6 years ago, the oppressed folk of the lower city, choked by poisonous fumes and ground down by the upper city's endless exploitation, had dared to rise up. Under the banners of Fandel and Hilco, they stormed the gates, determined to seize control of Piltover and win a brighter future for their children. But their cold steel couldn't stand against the upper city's firearms. After suffering catastrophic losses, they were driven back beyond the Piltover Bridge, a yawning chasm that served as an unbridgeable divide. Defeated and demoralized, they never again set foot north of its soaring arches. Today, however, everything changed. At dawn, a new rebellion, led by Wei and Lucian, rushed the bridge with a ferocity the city had not seen in years. Makeshift cannons boomed, shattering walls once thought impregnable. Rebel squads overran sentry posts, cutting through every line of defense until they stood at the grand doors of Piltover's Parliament building. Within moments, 6 high-ranking councilors were bound and silenced. The city's entire military apparatus now lay at the rebels' feet. Where hope had once gone to die, a fierce new dawn was breaking. The dream of equality, buried in blood 6 years ago, had been reborn. Stop the curse! Realizing that Wei and his Black Alley allies had seized control of the entire upper city, Lucian staggered into the parliamentary hall and collapsed onto a bench, feigning total drunkenness. While everyone, guards and conspirators alike, believed him out cold, he quietly severed the enchantment that had kept Fandel in a magical coma. Deep in the cellar beneath Fugan Tavern, Fandel's eyelids fluttered open. He sat up, pressing a hand to his throbbing forehead, and muttered in astonishment, "That boy really can hold his liquor. After all these years, I never expected to end up in his grasp. They'll get a kick out of this." "Uncle Fandel, you're awake!" Baum, who had been stationed at his side, threw his arms around Fandel with relief. "Sister and the others are fighting the city guards in the upper city right now. You have to go. Help them." Fandel's heart raced. He barked questions at Baum and the two other attendants, gathering every scrap of intelligence about the ongoing skirmish. Then he yanked on his reinforced gauntlets and burst out of the tavern. In just a few hours of his enforced stupor, the situation had escalated to the brink of disaster. As the mastermind behind the rebellion 6 years ago, Fandel knew all too well how swiftly such conflicts could spiral out of control. He had no choice but to get there, and fast. Lucian dashed across the bridge into the upper city, relief washing over him when he saw no sign of the Black Alley brothers' bodies. He hadn't wanted another war with the upper city. He'd only tolerated their exploitation because he feared more bloodshed. 6 years ago, that conflict had orphaned too many children and shredded countless families. He'd compromised to spare them further loss. But now, if he could seize the upper city and realize his old ideals without sacrificing another life, how could he refuse? He raced through the streets and, to his astonishment, found the gangs from Black Alley holding every intersection. A calm settled in his chest as he realized their plan had succeeded without a single casualty. By the time he reached the Parliament Hall, his heart hammered only with anticipation. He burst through the doors and spotted Wei, alive and unharmed. "Wei, I'm so glad you're all right," he breathed. The moment Lucian appeared, Wei let her blood-stained gloves fall to the floor and flung her arms around him. "Lucian, you're awake. We've taken the upper city. No one will ever look down on us again," she exclaimed. No matter how courageous she appeared, Wei was still only 14. After all she'd witnessed, the bloodshed, the terror, it was impossible for her not to harbor some fear. "Wei," Fandel said, giving her shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze, "you're my pride." He glanced across the chamber at Lucian, curled up in an old recliner and fast asleep, then refocused on the task ahead. Seizing Piltover's upper city by force had been one thing. Holding it and turning it into the foundation of their ideal Zon would be far more difficult. Piltover was the heart of trade in the region, its streets brimming with wealth so notorious that legends claimed you could spot a gold coin every 5 steps. Even if that was an exaggeration, it spoke volumes about the city's allure. The Piltover Guard's advanced firearms had long deterred invaders, and the city's councilors, wealthy merchants, and powerful families had spent lavishly to forge alliances that kept covetous outsiders at bay. But now, those guards lay broken, and every high-ranking official in Piltover had been captured or eliminated. What remained was the real work of consolidation, of transforming a conquered city into the cradle of their Zonite renaissance. Fandel sighed. The worst was yet to come. If Piltover and New Zon cannot muster enough strength to defend themselves, the great powers beyond our walls will swallow us whole. None pose a greater threat than Noxus, the warmongering empire nearest our borders. Do you think they'd let a prize like Piltover pass them by? Their appetite for conquest and plunder is legendary. Until now, Noxus has held its hand because Councillor Mel is the daughter of the head of the Medarda family, one of Noxus's most formidable houses. But that protection won't last forever. If we're to secure Piltover's independence and guide New Zon through the upheaval that follows the reunification of our upper and lower districts, we need greater power, power beyond standard militia or guarded ramparts. I've come to one conclusion. We must harness Lucian's abilities. Tipsy as he was, he nearly overwhelmed our defenses. Sober, he'll be unstoppable. New Zon's future depends on it. I need to find a way to keep him on our side, no matter the cost. Chapter 536, Prince Lucian of Zuan. It's done! Prince Lucian of Zuan broke the mental link he'd used to sift through Fandel's thoughts and allowed himself a faint, satisfied smile. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned. Earlier that day, he had slipped into the lower city bookstore and spent hours poring over dusty tomes until he'd pieced together the true balance of power across the Valoran continent. Piltover reigned supreme in wealth. Its coffers overflowed more richly than even those of Noxus or Demacia. Yet in raw military strength, Piltover remained dead last among the 10 great cities. Without their ingenious firearms and mechanical marvels, the city's citizens would be utterly defenseless against the sorceress armies beyond their gates. Magic was the real currency of power in Valoran, but in Piltover it was anathema. Spellcasting was outlawed, feared as a force of indiscriminate destruction. Demacia, by contrast, drilled forbidden runestones into its knight's armor to deflect most arcane attacks, reducing mages to little more than sword-wielding infantry. Piltover's answer was bullets and steel, guns they hoped could control the battlefield in place of true magic. Lucian knew their confidence was misplaced. No rifle could rival the precision, the finesse of well-wrought sorcery. The only exception, they grudgingly admitted, was Janna, the storm's fury. Even Piltoverans bowed to her mastery of wind magic. Rising from his seat, Lucian folded his arms, let them cling to their rifles and runestones. Soon enough, they would learn that true power belonged to those bold enough to embrace the arcane, and to princes who could see and seize their moment. She could summon storms that leveled entire districts, yet she only appeared when the stakes were truly high. If Lucian wanted to keep the counselors from wresting control of New Zaun and reverting it to its old, exploitative ways, he would need her power, the very force that had tipped the scales in the last crisis. The following morning, under Lucian's direct command, every pocket of resistance in Pi City was crushed, and both the upper and lower city came firmly under his rule. But he refused to mete out the kind of brutal justice Silco might have. Instead of executing the deposed counselors and senior officials, Lucian stripped them of their political privileges and relegated them to ordinary merchants. His aim was clear: fairness between upper and lower city, not senseless cruelty. He also understood that Pi City's future prosperity depended on these very merchants, even those he had just demoted. And when it came to respected scholars like Professor Heimerdinger, Lucian showed them the highest respect. By day's end, he had personally escorted the professor back to the academy to resume his teaching and research. Piltover's technological brilliance today exists almost entirely because of Professor Heimerdinger and the academy he founded. He's the only congressman who truly cares about the downtrodden districts, and his school admits talented students from the slums without discrimination. Lucian groaned as he sat up in bed, one hand pressed to his forehead. He peered at the 3 figures standing in his chamber. "Sorry I passed out on you last night," he murmured, feigning a hangover. "Did I cause any trouble?" "Not at all," Fandel replied immediately, shaking his head. "If you hadn't stepped in, we never would have secured Piltover yesterday." Lucian managed a weary smile. "All right, but I think I'll have to swear off heavy drinking from now on. I can't afford to wreck my health." Fandel rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Brother, you don't need to quit. Just pace yourself, and whenever you do want to drink, count me in. I'll always raise a glass with you." Wei and Baobao exchanged astonished glances. Lucian himself blinked in surprise. "Brother?" he echoed. "Mr. Fandel." Fandel clapped him on the shoulder. "Just call me Fandel. After last night, we're more than just allies." He grinned. "We're family." "Fandel? What brother?" Lucian asked, rubbing his temples as if trying to clear away the fog from last night's revelry. Fandel grinned widely. "Lucian, have you already forgotten our grand drinking bout yesterday? You declared me your brother before the whole tavern, so as of now, Lucian, you are my blood brother. Fandel, Crown Prince of New Zaun." Fandel swept his gaze toward Wei and Baobao. "Go on, kids. Call me Uncle Fandel." With that settled, the newly unified city of New Zaun, now joined from upper to lower district, moved quickly to reshape its government. The old parliamentary system of Pi City was to be abolished in favor of reviving an imperial model inspired by ancient Shurima. Yet no one pretended New Zaun could match Shurima's former glory, so they settled on the title of Kingdom by unanimous recommendation, proclaimed Fandel as its king. The investiture ceremony drew on the ancient legend of the Yellow Robe Mutiny at Qianqiao, a simple yellow robe draped over Fandel's shoulders to signify his authority. Social ranks, after all, exist even in the city's poorest quarters. Local bosses in the lower district had rallied their followers to Fandel's cause, and now they expected titles, land, and privileges in return. Fandel understood their ambitions perfectly well. He raised no objections, gladly accepted the crown, and assumed his role as King of New Zon. In his view, none of it was extraordinary. It was simply the natural order of things. What truly gave Fandel a headache was finding a way to keep Lucian and make him genuinely want to serve New Zon. After all, Lucian was a Demacian with a likely noble pedigree. Fandel spent the entire night turning the problem over in his mind until a bold idea struck him. The next morning, over a rather boozy council meeting, Fandel casually announced that Lucian was his younger brother and elevated him to the title of Second Prince of New Zon. Given Lucian's spectacular achievements just the day before, Fandel was confident everyone would accept this sudden promotion. Now that Lucian ranked immediately below him, Fandel reasoned, Lucian would be personally invested in New Zon's safety. He wouldn't dare stand idly by if the city were threatened. Huh? Lucian feigned surprise, his face registering utter confusion. In truth, he gave Fandel a quiet thumbs up in his mind. That was a clever move. Fandel clearly had more political savvy than he'd let on. Uncle Lucian, Wei and Bao Bao shouted in exasperation, rolling their eyes at Fandel's enthusiastic winks. With Lucian barely older than them, calling him uncle felt downright absurd. Yet there he was, second prince of New Zon. Lucian pressed a hand to his forehead and let out a relieved breath. So that's it, he murmured. Your father is my younger brother. What an honor. And you two, my nieces, please accept these gifts from your uncle. With a graceful sweep of his arm, two ornate greatswords slid free from hidden slots in the wall and clattered to the floor before him. Lucian inhaled deeply, and twin jets of flame flared from his mouth, engulfing the blades until they melted into glowing spheres of molten iron. Arcane runes shone like fireflies in the hot metal as it swirled. Within moments, the molten orbs solidified into a pair of reinforced gauntlets and a compact heavy repeater. Lucian traced the last glyphs midair and spoke softly, "Consolidate." A ripple of golden light snapped through the air, and the two finished magic weapons locked into crisp form before Wei and Bao Bao's astonished eyes. Thanks to the cross-world alchemical techniques he'd mastered, and the newly acquired Celestial Lotus Codex, Lucian could now forge low-tier magic arms in mere minutes. Despite their entry-level status, even these creations would be considered marvels in Piltover. Lucian watched as Wei didn't hesitate for a second. She grabbed the golden boxing gloves and slammed her fist forward. The moment her gauntlet connected, an invisible shockwave ripped out, shattering the reinforced metal wall of this Piltover outpost as if it were nothing. This wasn't the flimsy wood F the lower city. It was thick, industrial steel. At the same time, Bao Bao hefted the enormous Gatling gun that had seemed so unwieldy moments ago. To his surprise, it felt as light as a feather in his hands. He took careful aim at the breach Wei had created and squeezed the trigger. A hail of fiery grenades erupted into the Piltover sky, each explosion painting danger and beauty across the skyline. Lucian stepped forward, a satisfied grin on his face. "These weapons aren't just powerful," he said. "They're bonded to you. All you have to do is let a drop of your blood touch them, and you'll be able to summon them into your hand at will. Take your time with them when you can." Standing off to the side, Fandel's jaw dropped. He had never guessed that Lucian, this unassuming ally, was a full-fledged magician. Chapter 537, Hextech and Update. "Thanks, Uncle Lucian." Wei and Bao Bao chimed in unison. Under Lucian's direction, the stranger fused his fists and the heavy machine guns straight into his body. No clumsy slips, just a shiver of metal melding with flesh. The moment they called him uncle, any lingering awkwardness. The gift had been perfect, exactly what they needed, a gesture so thoughtful it felt more like a father's than an uncle's. "Lucian," Fandel blurted out, eyes wide with curiosity, "are you some kind of magician?" He still hadn't found any other explanation for the feat he'd just witnessed. Lucian glanced at the battered wall outside, then turned back with a wry smile. "All right, I'll come clean," he said softly. "The truth is, I lied to you at first." He settled into a more pensive tone, as if recalling events from another lifetime. I was born an orphan in Demacia, and accidentally discovered I could wield magic. You know how Demacia feels about sorcery. It's strictly forbidden, and in my case, dangerous beyond measure. One botched experiment reduced me from an adult to a child. Believe it or not, I'm actually in my 30s. Fearing the Inquisition's wrath, I abandoned my homeland and took to the road. When I arrived in this trading city, I hoped to find black market spellbooks that might teach me to reverse the transformation. With the right knowledge, I intend to reclaim my true form and finally be the man I once was. No wonder. Now it all makes sense. Fandel's eyes widened as understanding dawned on him. The boy, Lucian, was only 11 years old, yet he carried himself with the poise and wisdom of someone far older. His magical power was off the charts too. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Lucian, Fandel said, his voice warm, you can relax. As the Prince of New Zon, you're free to continue your magical studies here in Piltover. No one will stand in your way. This city is the center of global trade. Once the old restrictions are lifted, countless books and artifacts on magic will be passing through, and you'll easily find everything you need to restore your abilities. Centuries ago, Zon had been a thriving trade outpost of ancient Shurima, where magic flourished without restriction. When the region later split, Professor Heimerdinger founded his academy in Piltover to advance technology, and haunted by the devastation of the Rune Wars, he banned any arcane practice in the upper city. Even so, Piltover's attitude toward magic remained far more open than Demacia's outright hostility, and down in the smog-choked depths of Zon, few cared about magical regulations. After all, being exposed to corrosive chemicals day in and day out was a far greater threat than any spell. Heimerdinger's arrival in Piltover changed everything. His advanced inventions, automated foundries, precision cog machines, and steam-powered lifts sparked an economic boom. Uptown merchants rode the wave of prosperity, and the city's congressional delegates, eager for profits, threw their support behind Heimerdinger's initiative. Yet beneath the gleaming brass and polished gears lay the city's other cornerstone, hex magic. Piltover's original arcane research into rune-inscribed gems had already delivered unparalleled breakthroughs, energizing street lamps, purifying water, even stabilizing buildings in the face of quakes. When Heimerdinger protested that these two paths should not be forced to merge too hastily, the congressman ignored him. Profit, after all, was their highest law. Now, in the battered courtyard of Piltover's central keep, Fandel, chief among those delegates, clasped Lucian's gauntleted hands. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "With your power to defend us, this city will thrive like never before. Consider Piltover your second home." Lucian inclined his head. This was the perfect arrangement. Guarding Piltover against commonplace armies would pose no challenge. His strength outstripped any mortal force. Meanwhile, Piltover's position as a trading crossroads would let him gather hidden rune magic seekers from across the world, refining his abilities in peace. When he'd exhausted every mystery the city had to offer, he would move on, to seek out demigods, ascendants, star spirits, even true deities, and press his power still further. He closed his eyes, fingertips crackling with ethereal light. "Restored to original condition," he murmured. A beam of azure energy arcs toward the shattered stone wall, knitting fractured blocks and sealing splintered mortar. Within moments, the courtyard stood whole once more, another silent promise of Lucian's guardianship over Piltover. Chapter: The Origins of the Runic Crystal. Under Chancellor Fandel's astonished gaze, Lucian leaned forward. "By the way, I noticed that blue crystal last time was engraved with arcane runes," he said. "Can you help me track down its original owner?" Jace swallowed and nodded. Only hours before, he had used the very same runic matrix, bestowed upon him by Victor, a mechanical ascendant returned from the distant future, to forge the Hextech crystal. That core rune encapsulated the fundamental magical laws of this world, making it an unparalleled key for anyone seeking to master Piltover's arcane arts. 3 days later, in the Grand Hall of Piltover Academy, Lucian reclined on the dais as New Zon guards marched Jace forward in iron shackles. He studied the young inventor with a calm, almost casual interest. "Did you craft this magic crystal?" he asked. Jace's chest tightened, but he forced himself to meet Lucian's gaze. "Yes, Your Highness." A hush fell over the hall. Lucian's mind replayed the events of 3 nights ago, how Jace had led a cohort of Undercity outcasts, cut down Piltover's finest guards in an overwhelming display, and stormed the parliamentary chambers. Now that New Zon had been founded, Jace's influence was second only to the king's. And Lucian intended to unravel every secret bound within that enigmatic rune. Lucian stood motionless as the serrated blade hovered above the prisoner's neck. In New Zon, a single word of dissent spelled instant decapitation, and over the past few days, several prominent Piltover radicals had met that very fate. From the observing dais, Jace leaned forward, eyes alight with admiration. "Remarkable work," he called down. "I understand you're experimenting with controlling magic through technology. That's exactly the kind of innovation we need. Would you be willing to press on with your research?" Lucian rose, brushing dust from his coat. Hextech, the fusion of machinery and arcane forces, was not just a theory to him, but the future of magic itself. And only by mastering Hextech could he unlock the ancient runes Victor had recovered. With Piltover's newfound Hextech prowess, the city would finally break free from stagnation. "You'd actually support me?" Lucian asked, his voice low but steady. Jace's grin widened. Just 3 days earlier, the council had convened after a rune crystal detonated in Lucian's makeshift lab. Jace had presented a similar proposal then, only to be shot down by Professor Heimerdinger, who insisted no machine could safely contain raw magic. Not only had the professor rejected Jace's ideas, but the council had also stripped him of his research privileges. "Absolutely," Jace replied. "You've proven the doubters wrong. With your genius and the council's backing, we can redefine the very nature of magic and cement Piltover's place at the forefront of progress." Lucian nodded, determination smoothing the last traces of doubt from his face. As the executioner finished his grim task below, Lucian already envisioned the laboratories his supporters would help him build, and the untapped potential of Hextech waiting to be unleashed. Lucian gave a satisfied nod. "I've arranged for an assistant, too." At his signal, 2 guards stepped forward and led in a young man who leaned heavily on a cane. The newcomer's eyes darted around, confusion etched on his face. "What's this about? I work as an assistant at the academy. I had nothing to do with that New Zon uprising." "Victor, right?" Lucian said, stepping closer with open palms. "Relax. I mean you no harm. I only need your expertise. Mr. Jace here has developed a groundbreaking Hextech theory, and I'd like you to help him advance it." He indicated Jace, who sat poised and alert. Victor's gaze fixed on Jace, recognition dawning. "It's you," he breathed. Victor recalled the day Jace had been summoned for interrogation. As Professor Heimerdinger's aide, he'd heard Jace outline his vision, using technology to harness magic for the public good, and had been inspired. He'd meant to approach Jace privately, but then the academy sealed its gates, forbidding all faculty from leaving. He shifted his weight uneasily and managed, "By the way, I heard you suffer from congenital muscle ossification." He trailed off, uncertainty flickering in his eyes, as the weight of the past few days settled around them. Lucian's eyes narrowed as he studied the data scrolling across the display. "This isn't acceptable. It'll throw the entire experiment off track." Without another word, he strode to Victor's side. Red chi coalesced around his palms like molten ember light. Gently cradling Victor's head between both hands, Lucian activated his dual healing palm technique, an art said to cure any ailment. The chi pulsed and hummed, soothing every nerve. Then, with a precise, expert movement, he delivered a controlled slap to the side of Victor's skull. A soft ripple of energy washed through Victor, mending invisible fractures in his mind, while the impact knocked him clear of his stupor. Lucian released him at once, the red glow fading from his hands as Victor blinked, awareness returning. "Better," Lucian murmured, already turning back to the console. "Now we can proceed." Chapter 538, There Must Be Light. "My legs!" Victor couldn't believe it. Bathed in the crimson glow streaming from Lucian's hands, he felt as if he'd been reborn. His once feeble legs, which had long since given up on supporting him, now pulsed with newfound strength. As Lucian withdrew his healing energy, Victor dropped his crutch and made a tentative step, then another. Overcome by joy, he began running in tight circles around the chamber. "After all these years, after everything, I can finally walk like a normal man." Tears brimmed in his eyes. Thank you, Your Highness. I swear to serve you faithfully for the rest of my life. Victor shook off his excitement enough to kneel on one knee, head bowed in solemn gratitude. He had grown up in the lower Rift district of Zon, born into poverty with a twisted spine and a rare, degenerative illness that left him perpetually frail. Desperate for a cure, he had made his way to the gleaming spires of the Shangcheng district, diving headfirst into every scientific text and mechanical workshop he could find. Yet even the most advanced technology of the uptown laboratories had failed him. His condition continued to worsen, and the city's leading physicians warned that, at best, his body would collapse entirely within 7 or 8 years. Now, thanks to Lucian's extraordinary power, Victor felt hope stir within him for the first time. Rising to his feet, he met the prince's gaze with unwavering loyalty. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would stand by Lucian's side and repay this miraculous gift of light and life. Lucian inhaled deeply, testing each breath. Under the prince's magic, he felt stronger than ever, his feebleness gone, every illness banished, even the limp that had plagued him for years completely healed. He would once have died in his 30s, at the very peak of his life. Now he'd been granted a reprieve. It was nothing short of a salvation, and he bowed his head in gratitude. "You don't need an eternity," Lucian said, lifting his gaze to the prince. "Just help me unlock Hex technology." He nodded toward Jace, who stood wide-eyed and silent. Beside him, Jess found her voice at last. "Your Highness, does that mean you can use magic as well?" The prince offered a small, confident smile. "I am a mage. I will take part in the next phase of Hex technology research." Relief and excitement flickered across Lucian's face as he inclined his head in thanks. 4 days later, in the bustling lower district of Shinzhuan, Fander struggled into his ceremonial robes. The gilt embroidery was exquisite, the silk shimmering, but it felt like armor too cumbersome to bear. "I don't understand why we must dress like this," he grumbled, adjusting a stiff collar. "It's awkward, and it slows me down." "You are His Majesty the King now," murmured the man at his side, the former grocery store owner who'd been appointed governor. "Wearing royal garb reassures the upper city's aristocrats. It reminds them who holds the throne. If they see you adorned in majesty, their resistance diminishes." Fander paused, smoothing a wrinkle from his sleeve. "Very well, let's hope this costume business keeps the nobles in line." With that, the newly crowned king stepped forward, his awkward posture straightening into regal resolve. The governor fell in beside him, and together they moved toward the palace gates, ready to face the challenges that awaited them. "Since you're king now, you must look the part, dress to project authority and give Xiao Xiao something to fear. If you parade around in your old rags, the merchants and townsfolk of the upper city will mutter that their ruler is nothing but a backwoods buffoon." "I hate this dress," Wei groaned, yanking at the billowing skirt. She regretted volunteering to lead the charge uptown this morning. As the kingdom's eldest princess, decorum was no longer optional. "I think it's lovely," Bao Bao chimed in, clutching her doll in one hand and Wei's in the other. The youngest princess, dressed in a nearly identical pink skirt, beamed. "It brings out your hair beautifully." Just then, Lucian stepped forward. His rosy locks were crowned with a jewel-encrusted circlet, and his own attire, an impeccably tailored pink tunic and skirt, had been crafted by Uptown's finest stylist. In an instant, Wei's usual tomboyish swagger had vanished. She looked every inch a poised court lady, provided she stayed silent. The moment she opened her mouth, that illusion would crack. "This is absolutely the last time," she muttered, her deep, unvarnished voice echoing through the chamber as her cheeks flamed with embarrassment. Lucian glared at the stiff, ceremonial tunic in his hands. "Tomorrow I'm officially taking command of the new Zuan guards," he muttered, "and if I never have to put on one of these again, it'll be too soon." Wei's lip twitched in disgust as she eyed the ornate uniform. Fandel shook his head with an amused smile, then glanced at Lucian. "Are you absolutely sure this is safe?" "Don't worry about it," Lucian replied coolly. He slipped the tunic aside, flexed his shoulders, and in one fluid motion spread his wings. With a powerful beat, he lifted himself into the air above the lower city. Below him, the district lay choked with smog, strewn with refuse and the stench of industrial runoff. Lucian stretched out both arms and called in a clear voice. Clean up! Instantly, a surge of arcane energy burst from his core. An invisible wave rippled outward, erasing poisonous vapors, sweeping away garbage heaps, neutralizing every trace of chemical residue. Where the magic passed, stone and street alike gleamed as if newly laid. Within moments, the once dingy lower city had been transformed into a spotless, orderly district. Citizens emerged from alleyways, mouths agape, eyes fixed on Lucian as he descended. He landed gracefully, pressing his palms to the cobblestones. Brilliant lines of glyphic light unfurled from beneath his touch, forming an enormous magic circle that radiated with power. "Let there be light," he declared, and the circle flared, bathing the entire neighborhood in a pure, luminous glow. Around him, stunned onlookers whispered and stared, finally daring to believe that, under their new captain's command, even the dirtiest corners of the city could be reborn. Lucian stood at the edge of the lower city, once little more than a sunless canyon wedged between lofty towers. Now, as if slicing open a great wound in the sky, the clouds peeled back and sunlight poured in, bathing every street and alley in warm light. Just days ago, this district had felt like a sewer, dark, damp, and forgotten by the world above. Today, it was waking. Hands raised, Lucian traced intricate runes through the air. The floating glyphs shimmered, then rippled outward in waves of silvery magic. "Let there be trees," he murmured, and sturdy trunks burst from broken pavement, their branches unfolding into lush canopies. "Flowers and vines," he added, and blossoms of every hue erupted across lawns and ledges, climbing walls and spilling over benches. Within moments, a once sordid neighborhood glowed like a secret garden. Lucian lowered his arms and surveyed his work. Where grime and despair had reigned, a vibrant oasis now thrived. Towering glass spires and gleaming walkways of the uptown district no longer boasted a monopoly on beauty and progress. Here, art and nature blended with wondrous technology, each complementing the other. Fandel, Lucian's companion, stood quietly beside him, eyes wide with awe. "Who said magic only destroys?" he whispered. This is truly amazing." Lucian offered a small, satisfied smile. In that moment, the lower city was more than just transformed, it was reborn. Lucian spent the last few days wrestling with one question: how to transform Nuzon's downtown district. Though he'd only recently been crowned king, and had already united the city's lofty heights with its grime-choked depths, turning his vision into reality proved far more complicated than he'd anticipated. First and foremost was the environment. 2 centuries of industrial runoff, discarded chemicals, and constant smog had rendered the lower city's air and water almost irredeemable. No decree or edict could scrub away that legacy overnight. Lucian considered relocating Lower Zon's residents to the safer, cleaner upper levels, but the idea immediately struck him as unworkable. Forcing such a migration would spark mass unrest among upper city merchants and citizens who had tolerated a change in leadership so long as their livelihoods and privileges remained intact. Push them too far, and they'd either revolt or simply pack up and leave, neither of which the fragile new regime could afford. Beyond political fallout, Lucian also recognized a cultural barrier. People born and bred in the lower streets had learned to navigate its chaos. The upper city's faster pace and stricter regulations would feel foreign, even oppressive to them. Many would resist the move simply out of habit or pride. Stability, therefore, had to come first. Lucian knew he couldn't impose a top-down solution overnight. Instead, he resolved to tackle the problem step by step, improving water filtration, incentivizing cleaner factories, and gradually introducing public services unfamiliar to Lower Zon. Little by little, he would close the divide, always mindful that the only way to keep New Zon united was to bring its people along, not leave them behind. Just when he was at his wit's end, Lucian discovered the root of the problem and set in motion today's remarkable transformation. Until now, everyone had taken his ingenuity for granted, but even they couldn't have predicted a solution bold enough to reimagine the entire lower town. Overnight, its drab streets gave way to lush plazas, art-lined boulevards, and sparkling canals. With public safety firmly in place, curiosity from the upper town is already swelling. Families who once feared venturing below are now eager to move in or spend weekends exploring the new markets and gardens. Lucian knows this surge of visitors will revitalize local businesses and solve the area's chronic economic woes. More than that, he believes that as citizens mingle freely, sharing ideas, meals, and festivals, the old divide between high and low districts will vanish. In a few short years, upper and lower will be nothing more than names, and the hostility born of separation will be consigned to history.